Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
And special guest, Sofía Gomez Villafañe. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. You are now, I guess, a 4-time Argentine national champion.
Yep.
Super impressive. You just came back from Argentina, actually straight to Reno for Carson City Off-Road.
That is correct.
And congratulations, you defended your title. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, thank you.
Twice.
Yep, in the cross-country discipline. So it's always, it's pretty special to have your country's flag, getting to rep it for the whole year. So I'm really excited.
I think you guys should get a belt, kind of like WWF, like World or National Champ.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sweet, right? Lifting up the belt. Yeah, that'd be awesome. It's also like, it's worth saying too, that I feel like the Argentine national, like the jersey looks really good. Like some countries, it doesn't look quite as good. This one looks awesome. It's just like super simple, white, baby blue. It's pretty sweet. Nice. So yeah, congrats. And now you're here for something completely different.
Yes, big race on Sunday.
Yeah.
Lots of miles
versus, 90-minute cross country and then even shorter short track, right? So,
correct.
So I want to, before we go into anything, you're just going to join us as a regular host, answering the questions with us. Everything else is going to be pretty fun.
We'll give you the hard ones.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're joining us, you can do so live on YouTube and Facebook. It's usually every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific. Next week, we are going to be a day early, just a heads up, since it's our Independence Day here in this country. So we'll be celebrating that. So we'll be a day early. That's Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific next week. But if you're joining us right now on YouTube, something that really helps the podcast, if you like this podcast, is subscribe, obviously, to the channel, but like the podcast, the video that you're watching right now, and you can always tune in after the fact, and you can watch it after as well. And if you toss in a comment, anything like that, YouTube just ends up pushing this to more cyclists, so we help more people get faster. Yeah. Hopefully not your competition, because you want to beat them, right? But it's just the same.
Well, it also helps us as a company. So if you like Trainer in the features, like it, and then we actually will get more employees, and we'll build more stuff, and we'll get bigger, and we'll build you more features.
Make you faster.
By the way, Jonathan.
Yes.
Is there a new feature that just got launched?
Yes. Yeah, we should absolutely talk about it. Outside workouts, we've talked about it before, and we went into some detail on how it works, but it is now live for being able to push those workouts to your Garmin head unit. Wahoo is in progress right now, because I know you guys use Wahoo head units, right?
Correct.
On the team. Pretty sweet. So it's really cool. And for those that don't know, you can push this to basically the head units or the watches that work with Garmin's training API. So that's like the big thing there.
Yeah, pretty much all the new ones except like the 500.
Yeah, and the Edge 130, it doesn't work, for example, because they blocked the training features, or they don't have them on that head unit. A couple watches, I'm not entirely sure if it does, but I know that the Forerunner 935, 945, the Phoenix series, those ones, it all works really well on it.
It's all on our website, and if you bought a watch or a Garmin in the last few years, you're perfectly fine.
Chances
That's not
are.
one of the teeny ones.
Yep, yeah. Chances are you're set up pretty well. It's really cool. There's a great experience that you'll have just when you end up launching the workout. Like for example, I just go to start an activity on my watch, and when I start my activity, it says, "Do you want to do your workout?" It's just like that easy, and I hit yes, and then I start riding, and it's all done. It's really cool. So you can take your training outside, get faster year round. You don't have to just use it just inside now.
On the 1030, because the way we push these through is through the calendar. And on the 1030 you open, it just says, "Do you want to do your workout?" You just turn it on, and you say yes,
so cool.
and you do it.
Yeah,
nice.
It's awesome.
Very nice.
So we have some guidelines. You can check it out. Actually, if you go to blog.trainerroad.com, you can get a little bit of behind the scenes and how we created this, because Chad and a lot of our employees here, we put in a lot of work to be able to create these workouts that would be optimized for outside riding. It's not just like the same exact workout outside. In some cases it is, because it is a workout that's good to execute outside. But ones that had a more complex interval structure, one that would be tough to be able to replicate outside, we made sure that we redid those workouts in terms of the structure, but it still gives you the fitness lands in the right buckets, so to speak. Correct. So it's pretty awesome. Check it out, blog.trainerroad.com, and then you can see we have like best practices, a bunch of suggestions, and some tips for when you're training outside that can really help. So yes, please check that out. It's exciting stuff. So first of all, let's go into your history, because like 4 years ago, did you have in mind that you would be a 4-time Argentine national champion?
No, I honestly didn't even think I was going to be racing bikes 4 years ago.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I've been racing bikes for a really long time, since I was 14 through the high school program in NorCal, and that at that time, that was the most competitive series you had. If you were winning those races, you were winning nationals, you were racing at World Cup level, and once I ended that, I was a little bit tired It was just a little bit too much for me. So then I went to college in Durango, Colorado, where for the next 4 years, I was just like, I'm going to learn how to ride a bike. I'm going to try road racing. I did cyclocross, tried a little bit of downhill, even BMX, just everything.
Yeah.
And then it was in the fall, I think it was November 2015, I got approached by my coach, Carmen Small, one day at our local, like, Wednesday cyclocross practice. And she was like, hey, like, who's your coach? And I was like, oh, I don't have a coach. Like, I work 20 hours a week. I go to school full time. Like, I just can't pay a coach. And she was like, let's talk. Like, I want to coach you. And I was like, okay. And I remember talking to Keegan. I was like, I think she wants to coach me so I don't beat her at her cross races. You know, like, I just had no idea. Did not know her. You know, she's been a world champion, and I think she's got a bronze at individual time trial worlds as well.
Yeah, she's an impressive athlete.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman, and she just knows so much. And I remember in our meeting, she was like, I have a 4-year plan. We're going to get you to the Olympics. And I was like, you're crazy. You know, like, this is not going to happen at all. And, you know, sure enough, year to year, the first year I was like barely getting UCI points, and then I was cracking the top 15, and then the next year the top 10, and now I'm like fighting for podiums and wins. So it's been a really interesting kind of like 4-year progression, and not anything that I expected.
Has had to require patience, I'm sure. Like, you know, because a lot of us, like us average Joes, we pick up cycling, and then we're like, all right, this year we're going to go do, and we put down some huge goal. Like, we're just going to get it done. Did you have to, like, how have you managed that part of it? Being okay with not winning instantly, that sort of a thing, as you've been building up through it? Or was it just natural because that was the progression you took?
I mean, I think part of it, like genetics, I am slightly gifted, and that endurance has always come pretty easy for me and my siblings.
Yeah.
But I didn't start and I was like, I'm going to be national champion, or I'm going to be winning a pro XCT, or I'm going to be doing this and that. I was like, I'm just going to race my bike and we'll see how it goes and see where I can take. One of my biggest goals is to pay my student loans with bike racing money.
Yeah.
So like that was my goal. I was like, it might take like 10 years, and I think now I'm closer to like 4. It's even this year, like I don't expect to win. I think I'm still developing. I still have I still need to grow quite a bit, and most importantly, I need to learn a little bit more on how to actually race a bike race.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about strategy today, a lot of it. Because can we just go straight into Cape Epic?
I want to ask first. So, being the 4-time national champ, is the Olympics like set for you? Could they choose? Like, how?
Yeah.
Are you going to go to Olympics?
It's not set yet. I think it's more than likely that we are going to, as the women, we're going to qualify 1 spot for the Olympics. And actually, the Thursday before national champs, I got how they're going to select who goes to the Olympics, and it's 3 things that they look at. 30% of it was based on our result on Sunday. So if you got first place, you got 0.33 points. If you got second, 0.66, and so on. So like right now,
you got it.
Yep. So I'm like the lowest. So I'm like currently leading, kind of.
Nice.
Oh my God. And then 40% of it is going to be at Pan Am's next year, which is going to be in April in Argentina.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And then the other part, the 30%, is how many points you gave the country to qualify a spot for the Olympics.
And are those UCI points?
Yes, they're going to be UCI points. And believe it or not, out of the top 3 that were getting points, I am the lowest. And that really has to do with the fact that in the U.S., the level is just so high. You know, you're racing current world champions, past Olympic medalist, world medalist, and everything. So for me to be able to get on a podium here, it's like really, really hard.
Yeah.
Where in South America, most of the girls can go and they're guaranteed a top 3. So that's something I need to start looking into. How do I get more points just in case anything happens at Pan Am's?
Yeah.
But yeah, to even be talking about maybe going to the Olympics is just...
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that's in 2020.
2020 in
Yep.
Tokyo.
In what month is it? It's in summer, right?
Olympics?
Yeah.
They're actually in September.
September.
Yep.
So that's a perfect stepping stone for Cape Epic,
Exactly.
which I know is your true A race
Yep.
in
We should
2021.
explain if people
Yes.
are just listening to the podcast. It kind of came out, I think that, Sophia, you pitched the idea, didn't you?
Yeah, I think we were at Benelli or something, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, Nate has this crazy idea. He wants to do Cape Epic, and I'm not going to do it. And I was like, this one friend from Argentina that I have, her and her partner did it in the partner race, and they won. And I was like, she did it. She won. Like, I can do it too. I think, like, post-Olympic year, like, why not? You know, and you know, then you shared it in the podcast. And last night I was chatting with my coach, and I was like, oh, by the way, I should just let you know I kind of signed myself up for 2021 Cape Epic. And she was like, oh, great, maybe I'll come too. I was like, oh, okay, good. We're good. So we're clear.
Good. So you're committed now on the podcast.
Yep.
Okay, good.
So you're going to co-ed team, you two.
Yep.
Cape Epic 2021.
Yep.
Which you're not counting or anything, like 627 days away, right?
Exactly. It is exactly
got it,
627 days. Chad, first question. Is it too early to taper?
No, it's definitely too early to start training. I'm going to wait till about 27 days out, I think. So I got 600 days to kill.
Because Chad's doing it too.
Oh, yeah, you're doing it too.
Chad and
with
Pete are doing it, yep.
That doesn't even matter. You guys will do great. Okay. First thing, I got a lot of questions because we haven't really talked about this, maybe a little bit with text.
Yeah.
But we haven't gone deep.
Yeah.
You know you're way faster than me, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
We've never ridden together.
I have
faster.
I have a
You're
lot
faster.
of so mountain biking, 100%. If we're in a crit, maybe I'll give you a run for your money.
Right.
But in Cape Epic, so can you talk about power to weight ratio, or is that secret for you? It's fine if it's secret.
To be honest, I don't really keep track of it. FTP sea level, we're looking at 250-ish. Weight will range anywhere between 115 to like 123. So I don't pay attention to those numbers too much.
I believe before you're like, someone can do the math, but like 4.7, 4.8 watts per kilo.
Yeah,
right?
high fours to 5, close to 5.
And I'm like 4.1. So
when things go uphill,
it's going to be harder for me.
Yep.
I think
4.6.
probably right now I'm 190, 350 FTP. I'm going to do a ramp test Tuesday if I don't get any problems.
190 weight, 350 FTP.
So 100 watts higher, which would be nice on the flats, but on the hills, you can push me.
And also, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but Nate's tall. He's 6'6", in fact. We should share that. That detail has never been shared on the podcast before. But so he's a heck of a draft, too.
How tall are you?
5'5" on a good day.
Yeah. So that's like, it kind of actually helps in that regard, since you have the higher threshold, but then you give a good draft, that sort of a thing on the flats, that can be a huge help.
Yeah, and then on the descending, you're fast. I saw on some of the races, you were like right where Jonathan was.
Yeah, she's really fast.
So that will have to be, I know the descents aren't technical, right, at Cape Epic? Have you done any research?
I've talked to people about it, and they just say the first 3 days, there's not really any single track.
Yeah, it's just like double track fast descents, right? So I've got a whole plan of going North Star every Friday, getting lessons. Lee McCormick's coming back to Reno.
He is.
The shred shaman.
Yes, we're going to have another podcast with him for sure.
Cool.
Anytime to have him on is an awesome one.
Yeah. So anyways, I just, I'm going to do my best. I got a 2-year plan. Chad's going to help. But by the way, Chad, so I need to get up to 4.8 watts per kilo over 2 years. My volume right now, if I'm consistent, 8 hours a week, I think what I need to do is just add total volume over that time.
Most
right?
likely, because you've already got a fair amount of intensity in there. So just heaping intensity on top of intensity as a Band-Aid for greater watts usually doesn't work.
Yeah.
What kind of step over 2 years would you have someone do if they want to add that much volume? And two, I think I'm going to need more volume because it's going to be 7 or 8 days?
It's 8 days.
I should know this.
I think it's 8 days. And you're probably out on course for anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours, I think, a day, depending. So it's a lot of volume that you
it depends how we want to compose it and how we want to address what we think is limiting you. Whether or not you could push your VO2 max higher, and I think you can. I don't think you're going to lose any substantial weight, so that won't even factor into it. And your muscle endurance is pretty much topped off. So I think you're going to have to improve your VO2 max, and the way you go about it is probably going to mean greater mileage, greater volume. So I'd like to push you up to something like 12 to 14 hours, but that's maybe a 2-year trajectory, depending, because you had just basically life's obligations. It's not that you couldn't handle that bump in volume in the first year. I just don't know how you're going to accommodate it on top of everything else you have to do.
Trainer Road's not being worked on. Like it's half days all day for like 2 years.
Yeah, well, in that case, let's go for 20 hours.
Yeah.
Right
Sorry,
out of the gate.
everybody. We got a good team here. They can all take it over.
Yeah.
Next one, partner pacing strategy. So there's two parts of pacing. One is running a partner race, right, where we're together. Have you done that before?
No, actually.
Neither have I.
Neither
Good.
way.
Perfect.
So we have to be within a certain distance of each other, right?
Yeah. It's the
It's
timing.
like a minute or something.
Yeah, I think that so the person that crosses the line last out of the duo, that's where the time gets counted, but you also can't be separated by too much.
Yeah, you're
time.
tethered, right? By a
Yeah, I'm not
I
sure
think
what
it's a
the
minute
exact
or
buffer
something.
is.
There's
It's
a-
like a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not like Sophia can just like jet away from Nate, or Nate can
just
jet away
wait.
from Sophia, and then just, hey, do your best.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't work that way.
So for strategies, obviously on the flats, I should never drop you, right? Because you're going to get a draft.
Please, correct, yeah.
On a climb, if it's a headwind, please get in front of me and sit up as much as you can, right? Because that will make it easier for me.
Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about on the descents, and this goes for everyone who descends with someone better than them. When I descend with Jonathan, and he's got Jonathan speed, and then he's got like chill speed. And when you do chill speed, I go almost twice as fast because I can follow all of your lines. Rather than if you just take off, right, as hard as you can. And then sometimes I look for the tire in the dirt, but it really helps.
Yeah.
And I'll get faster, I swear.
And I think a faster rider, when they ride at that chill speed, like you said, they're able to pick a lot smoother lines. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that too. Like when you slow it down a bit, it's really amazing how you can break something down. When you go race pace, it's just kind of like you aim for the best line, but you kind of take whatever comes at you. So I feel like if you were doing that sort of thing, and if Sophia's descending at 70%, something like that, 80%, then that would allow you'd be taking really good lines then, because it's like so below that threshold of speed that you would have on a descent.
And these are only in the single track sections. And the previous years, it's like for the whole stage, it'd be like 2K. Everything else is just let it fly.
Oh yeah.
And I might even pass you on the descent.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's funny. I've thought that on the flats or on like the false flats, it's kind of like where I'm gonna really be in the hurt box, just because you can push bigger watts, and I mean you are bigger and all that stuff, but that false flat climbing, I'm tiny person, and if there's a lot of sand, or if it requires like a lot of power, like that's when I'm in trouble. And something, I was talking to my friend and her partner that won the race, and he was like, the hardest thing is whoever is the faster rider needs to learn how to race at the speed of the slower rider. Because you just race differently, and the way you take lines might be differently. And you're like, okay, in this section, like normally I would stand up, but my partner is sitting down, so I need to know how can I put the power down while I'm sitting down and not lose traction. So I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think we need to do a little camp at some point, both of us.
No, we do.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's going to be different because our bodies are so different. And we might have the highest height discrepancy and weight discrepancy in the race.
Probably.
Right? Between the two of us. Different points where on the flats, I will be probably the faster rider, but on all the climbs and descents, you'll be the faster rider. So it's not just, because a lot of times you see these, the co-ed, and it's like a pro UCI guy and then a pro woman.
Yeah.
And the guy's probably faster in all situations, right?
Yep.
And the guy pushes the woman up on the climbs and stuff,
Yeah.
which I hope you can do to me. I'm okay if there's a picture on the internet of Sophia pushing me up the hill with one hand on my back.
Right, exactly.
As I'm like head bobbing.
It's going to be super interesting to see. What about, I mean, you mentioned just looking outside of the pacing side of things, but nutrition side of things, and then everything else that comes with it. Like, are you guys planning on bringing like a team of people?
Okay. So we haven't talked about this.
Yeah.
No, I'm just letting him do all the planning. I'm just showing up.
Well, okay. But so for Cape Epic, there are two options: sleep in tents, or pay a little more money, get shuttled to a hotel with your own Swanee and masseuse. We're doing the masseuse in the hotel. Obviously. You too, Chad. I think you can get a group of people and you can get together and
cool.
It's all one shuttle and
Nice.
stuff, and that'll be fun.
Sounds really good.
For nutrition, how are you gonna? I haven't done. I think I've finished a long multi-day stage race because I broke my bike
At Single Track 6.
Yeah. So how do you manage? You've done stage races, obviously.
Yep.
I know you just won one, didn't you?
Yeah, Missoula.
Yeah.
My first Pro XCT win.
How do you handle nutrition, like on the bike and through, like the multiple days of recovery and keep eating so that you stay energy
Topped off.
topped off.
Yeah, I mean, I think breakfast is always really important. Just making sure you're gonna have enough carbs to get the day started. And I think during the race, it's like you just have to keep eating even when you don't want to eat. It's kind of like forcing yourself. And even after the race is done, it's like eat.
I noticed this when I was staying with you in Soho, or in Utah for the Soho Bike Fest. like everyone, we sat down after it was late nights. Like we would get back to the house and I would be sitting there recovering and then everyone else would be eating. And I'm like, I'm doing it wrong. Like all of you, cause it was a house full of athletes, like all of you were eating, you know, late at night, post race, that sort of a thing. And you were taking, whether it was like cereal mixed with some fruit or something, or it was like oatmeal with something else, you're bringing in carbs, you know, late at night before, you know, in the middle of those races. And that's something that's honestly hard if you've done what you just talked about. Ate a sufficient breakfast, make sure you ate throughout the day, make sure you ate well enough throughout the race. The last thing you feel like doing is eating more, but it's like exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, stagers just have to be good at eating.
Oh yeah, it's like a total part of the race.
Yeah, it sounds like such an automatic and such an easy thing to accomplish, but man, it's just not.
Yeah, I don't think you can leave with a calorie, like be positive. I think no matter how much you eat, you're going to be in the negative.
It's hard. Man can eat.
I'm 6 watts per kilo for eating. What's the article? Was it Cycling Tips? We just talked about the ground.
Great article.
Yeah, the pro. So if you
for Mitchelton Scott,
Yeah.
they followed their team and they basically looked at, I believe it was during the Giro, they looked at what they ate and they broke it down in terms of carbohydrates too per body weight, which is the interesting thing and kind of what you want to, if you're going to have a goal and you don't really know where to start and what to eat and how much to eat, this is kind of like a benchmark where you can see where these guys eat and they're pros at eating.
So our kilojoules won't be as much as them, but pretty close actually to those stages, especially with being mountain biking.
Yeah, I mean, you burn so much more on a mountain bike. We don't have a way of quantifying it, right?
Yeah.
But you sure feel it. Like, you know, like the KJs that you get when you go do a 4-hour road ride compared to a 4-hour mountain bike ride, it's like a totally different experience, even if it's the same values from your power meter.
So what they saw is that on the flat stages, like the early in the Tour or in the Giro, and it's all flat, and probably everyone who's listening can hang until the last 10K, right? It's just a draft. They're doing hundreds of like under 200 watts.
Right.
They were doing 6 watts or 6 grams per kilogram of body weight for carbs.
Yep.
That's their low end.
That's enormous.
That's probably more than most people, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's hard to do.
I don't know if you're able to do this on the spot, Nate, but can you kind of give us an idea of how much like food that would be? Like let's just say oatmeal or something like that, you know?
Oh, how much oatmeal that would be? So 1 cup of oatmeal is 100 grams of carbs. So like of dry, not
right.
So that makes 3 cups of like
Of
wet.
actual what you're going to eat.
So it's so whatever that is times 6 if you're
You're not going to
100
get there.
kilograms.
You're not going to get there eating oatmeal.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
It's a lot, yeah.
Oatmeal's not dense enough,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's got to be more.
So on the mountain stages and the harder stages, they would
Calorie-dense.
eat between like 10 and 14
Oh my god.
grams of carbs.
And we've
per,
seen 10 before as a high end of things for athletes, you know, high level endurance athletes, but pushing up to 14 and then only coming down to 6 grams
Amazing.
per kg per day.
Yeah. So what they said too, that like cycling carbs, 6 is their low end, which is probably more than everyone else.
Yes.
Right?
It's way more than us average Joes eat, I bet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you hear about them like cycling their carbs or only training or fueling for the work required,
It's still a huge amount of
yes, a
carbohydrate.
huge amount.
And
Instead
they're
of
just
14.
cycling lower than, or they're at a way
It's all
higher
relative.
level.
Yeah.
So I've
It's
only
long
done,
days.
I think on my max I've hit at Leadville was 9.
And that
And
was, we've talked
that
about
was
that before on the
brutal.
podcast. It was a sad sight to even
It was
behold.
horrifying. Yeah. Just cramming that much food into a
But
body.
when we
even a
do it
body
too,
that
though,
size.
Yeah.
I don't know how we have to figure out what food we can bring for ourselves. I might bring a suitcase just of food, right, of dry food.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
Like a 90-liter duffel.
Yeah, exactly.
but we need I can do 70 pounds on United, so
There we go. That's the
all gels.
benchmark.
it needs to be though like scientific food or junk food a little bit, because if you try to do it through apples and sweet potatoes
exactly
and
what I
brown
was-
rice,
That's what I was getting at with the oatmeal.
yeah, your stomach can't fit that much. So how do you work on that? Do you do scientific food, or are you trying to do like whole food or juice?
A little bit. Like, are you talking like outside of the race?
Yeah, outside the race.
Just different things. I can't eat the same thing all the time, aside from pancakes.
Yeah, pancakes.
Yeah,
Best.
it's kind of just different. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, give me candy. Like, I know it's junk food, but at the end of the day, it has the sugars, and it's just more calories than I can get in my body.
I'm gonna suspend all my like anti-cancer eating, all that sort of stuff for those 8 days, and just go pure,
Yeah, it's a short-term
pure
fix.
calories. Yeah.
Short term.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to, because the other thing too, when you look at this, like, and we noticed this when we did single track 6. You've noticed this, I'm sure, when you've done any stage race you've done, like at Missoula and everything else. Even though you may feel okay, like going in day to day, there is residual fatigue, and it kind of like you notice it in weird ways. Like I noticed it in just like my mind wasn't as sharp, right? And I probably wasn't eating enough. And if I was eating more, maybe I would have been sharper. It's just really hard to keep everything topped off during those stage races, especially one like this. This is big.
This is big. What about in the stage race pacing? Like, do you go all out every day? Or do you try to go like 90% every day until the last 3 days or something like that?
You know, I think it's going to be, you kind of have to see what your competition is. And I mean, I think our game plan is we're going to go win. Like we're not
Heck yeah.
going to go to do anything else. But you know, I've known people that have gone to that race and chosen these are the 3 stages that we're going to go really hard. And then the rest, we're going to, you know, tone it back. In the partner race, it's especially when it's co-ed, it's a lot different just because the discrepancy between team to team is pretty big. Where in the elite fields, it's pretty much almost like a level playing field where they go really hard for an hour and a half, and then once they drop everyone, then they bring it back down. But I think that sometimes, maybe taking one day a little bit easier or just playing in the defense if you are in the GC lead is the smart call rather than just like, let's just get as much time as possible each stage because you need to figure out how to put in recovery in there.
Yeah, you're not going to be equally good every day if that's your strategy. It's going to go downhill, you know, if you go
And you got to account for like things that go wrong. Like, you know, you could get sick, you could break your bike, you could break a chain, you could flat, you could just do all these things that are so outside of your control.
They have really, really good coverage, better than the Tour de France coverage, I think, of Cape Epic on
it's
YouTube.
Really impressive.
They have someone in the, they have 2 riders with e-bikes behind the men's pack and the women's pack with a camera that they stream out. So you can watch like a camera inside just a teeny peloton of like 10 people.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. The surprising thing for me is that how many mechanicals happen for the pros, like a lot of flat tires and just chain issues.
I think, you know, can I chime in on why I think that is too? Yeah. It's very different when you're following close on somebody and it's dusty or something else like that. It's so easy for these really skilled riders just to miss that rock in that scenario or miss that whatever else it is. So when you see like a lot of these people getting flats and mechanicals, remember the fact that they're trying to draft because they're going so fast.
In low visibility.
In low visibility. So it's really easy to make those mistakes. I'm sure you've realized that if you've ever ridden gravel or any sort of mountain biking, you can ride really close to a person, but that's a skill in and of itself. And there's inherent risk that you just can't get rid of when you do that.
And how many crashes there were. That's the second one. Like, I don't know, they're crashing on double track, which kind of gives me a little bit of worry.
For the same reasons, you think?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Reasons,
Couple that with probably the fatigue from a stage race and everything else.
Well, and you're not pre-riding these courses, so you're totally blind every day.
I am.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've already booked my ticket to South Africa for this other event 1 year ahead. So I'm going to I do as much as the course as I can.
They don't change the course anymore?
I don't know, but I'm guessing. So I don't know any of this stuff, but I'm guessing they use some of the same roads, right? Probably not the exact same course, but the tricky stuff in the area.
You're going to pre-ride all 7 days?
No. But you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
The hard parts I can try to
Cape
pre-ride.
Epic organizers, reach out to us to let us know if that's correct. If you have any beta on the course, we'll take that too. The other thing you're going to do on kits, because I think you guys, I don't know if you have to have matching kits, but you should have something close to matching.
I think so.
I mean, you can't wear the Argentine national champion jersey, but because you're not, in fact, from Argentina.
I cannot?
No, you should not. But white kits, right?
Yeah, because heat's a huge issue, right?
Yep, I struggle with heat quite a bit too. So
Yep.
I think I'm going to need to figure out a good protocol for heat adaptation for that.
Other thing I just wrote down yesterday, my goal this week is for us to buy a sauna for the office.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Cool.
A little infrared sauna we can put in the workout room.
You just need to move to Reno, then you have access to the sauna.
I know, although we are looking at buying one for the house.
That's what I was going to say. They're not that expensive. They're really not.
Yeah, they really aren't. The small ones aren't too bad.
Mm-hmm. How early do you think we should get to South Africa?
I mean, that's a good question. I think it's so hard because being at home is so nice.
Yeah.
And being in the U.S., you're kind of accustomed to having all these things. And over there, things are very different. So you kind of have to get there early enough to kick the jet lag and adapt to the heat a little bit more. But I think maybe like a week and a half.
A week and a half ahead?
2.
That's awesome. 2 weeks?
Because you're used to...
I have a family.
I know, right?
Because you're used to, I mean, that, bi-hemispheric travel where you're going from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere for Argentina.
Yeah, but never, South Africa, it's a long
It's a long
term.
time.
You have the time, because the time change is basically East Coast to West Coast, a little bit different when you go Argentina to back
Correct.
to Utah. But so you have time change on top of season change on top of everything else that you have. So.
Yeah, it's not quite opposite, but it's pretty close to opposite. So
Yep. Yeah.
we've done-
Wow.
I'm worried about. I get a boost so you live too at 4,200 feet or something like that.
55.
55. I get a boost when I go down to sea level, and I don't want to wait too long there, where then I lose my extra hematocrit and stuff.
Yeah, your performance level will still be the same in terms of like, your power will increase and you'll be able to do that. But you do have that hematocrit boost temporarily that you have,
Yeah.
which is pretty nice. Legal EPO, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
Good thing we have 627 days to figure it out.
Ooh, start my spreadsheet.
It's pretty exciting. I think everybody's probably looking forward to that. Something that you said really quick on the live coverage of the Cape Epic, something else I want to mention. We're going to try this. We haven't tried it before, but this weekend during the Fat Tire Crit, Keegan and I already talked about this, so hopefully you're up for this too. I want to try live streaming your race from your GoPro, so then all of us listening to this can actually. We won't have data. There's no way to get data live with our. We're not Valone or whatever the company is that has like for the Hammer series. Yeah. But so we'll add data on afterward, and we'll be able to do race analysis. But for the Fat Tire Crit this weekend at Carson City Off Road, it'd be cool to live stream your races. I think people, if you're listening right now, let us know if you would tune in. It'd be like 6 p.m. Pacific time on Friday. Tune in to see Sophia's camera and then to see Keegan's camera. Let us know if you'd be into it. Would you be up for that?
Cool.
Yeah.
I think all you have to do is carry a phone in your pocket, because I think you just have to have like a data plan or have data going. That way.
I think I would have to figure out a mount for the rear, because Todd let me run a front mount for Grand Junction.
Oh, cool.
But it totally covers my number, and he was not too happy with it, because I told him, I was like, oh, it's not going to cover it. And then I put it on. I was like, ooh. I was like, whoops.
Maybe
Jonathan can figure out a good mount.
Yeah, we have a mount on the front that you could use, and it will put the GoPro into the wind. But DC Rainmaker has actually done tests on GoPros, and the drag numbers are way lower than you'd think. Like, it makes hardly any difference.
1 or 2 watts.
Yeah, it's like 1 or 2 watts.
Yeah, I think my difference is because we tried it at Soho to run your mount, but then my Wahoo unit doesn't fit. Not that it really matters, but
I think I have a different one that
cool.
could work.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We have so many mounts here. So we're going to try that. It may not work. Stay tuned to our YouTube channel, because that's where we would stream it live. So you'll be able to see that. I'm not sure it works on Instagram, so I think the best way to do it is on YouTube. So that could be interesting, huh? Live streaming.
Yeah,
Fat
that'd be
Tire
awesome.
Crits. That'd be cool, huh? Okay,
You
cool.
need an earpiece so like the coach can be like, "What are you doing? Cover that."
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to follow up on something. Last week we set out, talked about some strength training benchmarks that we felt like if you were a certain rider type, having this level of strength would be sufficient in order to basically improve performance. And anything past that, you're probably going to be at a tipping point where that's probably adding more weight or excessive strength that really isn't going to be helping you become faster. But we kind of felt like we found the ranges, and we just wanted to add some clarifications on this.
So I want to say too the core why. I want to know, because I enjoy weightlifting, when to stop deadlifting, right? Like that was pretty much the core question I asked you, Chad, is when should I stop doing this? Because you can just keep going and going. You enjoy weightlifting and getting stronger and stronger and stronger, but the powerlifters don't make the best cyclists, right?
Yeah, and even if you just keep increasing strength, at some point that focus on strength training is going to come at the expense of your focus on endurance training. So there has to be a balance, and our balance has to shift really heavily toward the endurance side. So we really just wanted to find the minimum requirements for being strong enough to ride bikes well in particular disciplines relative to whether you're a male or a female.
There's the minimum level 1, but then there's like the
maximum,
adequate,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Perfect. Not adequate, but and it's not really maximum requirement too. I think it's
The maximum
you don't
end of
need to
things.
get any stronger.
Right.
And any extra strength's not going to make you a faster cyclist.
That's when you have to start asking yourself, how much time do I want to devote to strength training? How important is being a strong strength athlete to me relative to being a strong endurance athlete?
Yeah.
So again, these are just requirements, not even requirements, recommendations really, that say you're probably strong enough and you've probably got enough focus on strength training. You can cut it back if you've already reached the high end of things. If you're not there, ask yourself, do I feel like this is impacting my performance as an endurance athlete? Because it probably is. Because the low end of things, the level 1 stuff, it's really lenient.
Oh, yeah.
But it comes from literally 6-8 years of experience working with endurance athletes and seeing how weak in the strength realm a lot of them are. So I set those requirements pretty low because I recognize that a lot of people are below that and need to come up to it.
Yeah, you do a lot of strength training yourself, right, Sophia?
Yeah, I'd say my like 80% good at it. There's just sometimes I'm like, oh, I gotta go work, and then I gotta go train, and then I'm just tired. But like, I'll be honest, I can't really do more than like 2 push-ups. My upper body is really weak.
Yeah.
I can't really do a pull-up.
But you use like banded assistance and like that sort of stuff too with those sort of things, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Smart.
And I mean, when I was a kid, I could never do the monkey bars. So I think I'm just not destined to do really anything with my upper body.
You just haven't addressed it. I'm sure you
Probably
can.
what
Jack,
it is.
there's a gym right here. He's
I
gonna
know,
start
right?
training
I'll show you what to do.
Yeah, and you work with Art O'Connor, the strength coach, Wukar Fit. He understands, and one of the things, and we'll basically run through kind of like the frequently asked questions that we have on blog.trainerroad.com for this post, but you should check it out yourself as well. But one of the things is when you find a strength coach, or if you're looking at this and you're basically like, okay, so these are benchmarks, because once again, this isn't a plan. This is just benchmarks, right?
Yep.
And that's a key takeaway. You look at these benchmarks and you're like, all right, well, how do I go about it? I've never done strength training, that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's a good idea to find a strength coach, but it's so nice to have one that's familiar with training endurance athletes, because they're
Absolutely.
not going to.
It's a necessity.
Yeah, so yeah, you call it a necessity.
I think so.
Yeah, and that's like what you have there with Art. I mean, he's a really fast rider himself, and he's raced and trained for years, so he understands it.
I want to give just some examples.
Yeah, please.
So level 1 man.
Can I make the clarification first?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
The typo.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so
Oh, yeah.
I messed up on 2 levels, so this is all on me. But all the recommendations start out with a 5 repetition maximum for, I think we start with deadlift and then squat. And then it rolls down from there. And then after those 2, they say 5 RM, 5 RM, and then they all go to 1 rep.
They did.
And we've updated that. I've updated that because that is a crucial error. I don't want anybody shooting for a 1 repetition maximum for a number of reasons. First off, it doesn't translate to cycling. Secondly, it's a bit dangerous. I mean, unless you're a power lifter or an Olympic weightlifter, you're never really going to need to know that 1 RM. It's not very useful anyway from our perspective.
Yeah.
What I want to know is how good is your strength endurance, and 5 reps is a real good indicator.
Awesome. Perfect.
So they've all been updated.
Some examples.
So this is the minimum level that we think that, or Chad thinks that everyone should, of strength you should have. This is level 1. And if you're a climber, maybe you don't need to get any stronger than this. But for a man, be able to do 5 pull-ups. So I'll be honest, not all of us can do 5 pull-ups, but that's a really good way to. No, it's true.
No, I totally get it. I like how vague you were there. You know,
Yeah.
that was really good.
Some.
people.
Some. Chad can apparently do, what was it, 45, 90?
Yes, 72.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
No, God, no.
A level 1 woman, 1 pull-up.
Yep.
Do a pull-up. Yep.
Yeah.
Do a pull-up, and that's that. Then if you
That's
can
a
do
big
that,
differentiator.
yeah.
Oh, it is.
1 pull-up's hard.
Yes.
For a woman.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Some
for a man.
for other people too. It's not. No, there's definitely been times in my life where I could not do 1 pull-up.
Oh yeah.
And Chad, what's a way if you cannot do a pull-up? How do you step into that?
I like banded assistance. So Rogue makes monster bands. Spry makes all sorts of elastic bands. There are plenty of companies, and they're all basically the same stuff. So it doesn't matter what brand you go with, and they're cheap.
Basically-
and they allow you to do a lot. I mean,
Yes.
any bodyweight exercise can be assisted in some manner. So it's a really easy get, and it's really encouraging too, because when you hop onto the pull-up bar and you just dangle there and you can't do a damn thing.
Yeah.
That's what do you do with that?
Yeah.
I mean, you can do an eccentric where you jump up and then just slowly lower yourself down, but as we'll discuss later, that's pretty traumatic
Yeah.
to the muscle tissue. But it's so much better if you can actually go through the entire range of movement in an assisted manner. Put that band underneath you, get several repetitions, just start to build the neuromuscular bridges that need to be there, and that will reinforce the strength later.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to do one more bench press, level 1. If you're a 175-pound man, 5 reps at 70 pounds. And then it's going to be scaled to your weight. So that's pretty low, and I bet you if you've been to the gym before, you can probably do that. Pull-ups, I find, are much harder for people because they don't train them as much.
Yeah, and it takes a certain level of coordination with all the muscle groups that you need to use for that sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's tough.
there's plenty of technique to it.
Yeah.
For women, a 35-pound bench press 5 times.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's less than the bar.
Yeah, just slightly under.
I think any good gym has women's weighted bars, and I think they're 35-pound bars.
Perfect. Yeah.
Level 2 for a man, that's 10 pull-ups. And for a woman, it's 3 reps for pull-ups. And for bench press, that's going to be 100 pounds 5 times for a man and 55 pounds for a woman. And then for level 3, this is when you start to get a little bit more. Bench press is 165 pounds, so almost body weight, 90% of body weight 5 times. And for a woman, that would be 90 pounds, so 65% body weight 5 times. for those. Well, I'm sorry, in the woman weight example I'm using is 135 pounds.
Yeah, and you can head over to, like we said, blog.trainerroad.com, and you can see the strength training article that we have on this with the benchmarks that we've laid out. And there's a bunch of frequently answered questions there, and or frequently asked questions also answered. But you can check those out on there. I'm just going to run through what they are, but in the interest of time, because we have to get you up on the mountain to go shuttle and check out this course. So to get into the questions, but a few things really quick, like questions, so then you can go and find the answers. Is this a strength training plan? You'll see the answer there. When should I incorporate strength training during my training week? One of the most common questions we get associated with strength training. Do I have to wait until the off season to start strength training? Another common one. How much rest between sets? What if I'm stronger than these goals? I'm very bad at pull-ups. Any tips? We've given you some good tips here. Should I split my exercise into different days, like upper versus lower, push versus pull, something like that? Can I do variations of any of these exercises? For example, dumbbell bench press instead of barbell bench press. Do I have to do all the exercises in the same session in order for it to count? So tons of great information.
Yeah, so if you're typing these in right now for us during the live question segment of this,
you can go there.
Their answers are already there.
Yep. So you can check those out. And if you have more questions about it, you can submit it. Just trainerroad.com/podcast, where you submit all of your questions. And please continue doing so. We've got some awesome questions this week. Let's jump into it with Chris's question. He says, thanks for the podcast. It's clear to me how much effort you put into the shows. I race triathlons, mountain bike, and cross, and have followed numerous programs and read a good number of the top training books over the years. Your podcast has helped me better understand the sport and impacted my approach to both training and racing. 5 stars for sure. Sweet. Awesome. Good to hear, Chris. That's the whole objective. Says his question, the Wilmington Whiteface 100K, June 1st, was my A race for the season. I followed a specific program, checked out the course profile, tried to find race reports, etc. I was happy with my result, but I've already started thinking about how I can get faster for next year and maybe get under the time needed to be placed in a faster corral at Leadville if I were to win a lottery spot. He says he missed the position this year by about 8 minutes at this race. So it's a mountain bike race, 100K mountain bike race. So my question, as prepared physically as I was and knowing the general course profile, I didn't really have a race strategy. The first hill came and I just pedaled hard. That sounds familiar, right?
Yep.
We were talking about that on the way up here with Carson City Off-Road, how like last year, and I think even Noah Sears from MRP, we were going up the climb and he like yelled out, "This is highly unsustainable," or something like that, because it was just like, it was so hard, right? But it's really common. So he says, I didn't really have a race strategy. First hill came, just pedaled hard. When I found myself with a group on flats or downhills, I tried to stay with them. That's a good approach. I figured I was going to blow up at some point during the day, so I should just ride hard while I still felt good. The blow up came the last 2 miles as we rode through Whiteface Mountain. I worried that creating a race strategy would serve as a governor of sorts and stop me from pushing as hard as I did this year during the race. So how do you suggest creating a race strategy without getting too far into your head and overthinking it? He mentions, I know that triathletes use power or heart rate to help with this, not just triathletes, all endurance athletes. And he says, I haven't seen much taking this to the MTB world. So let's cover this question first. Actually, I'm going to do it reverse, because then he talks about the fact that he has a 3x9 drivetrain, and every time he drops down to the little chain ring, it's way too easy to pedal, and it's hard. 2 up in the rear, 1 down in the front, because he asked for a tip on that.
Yeah.
So I always, usually 2 in the back is going, and then 1 in the front, whichever direction you're going, is going to make things a bit smoother. Or you can have something, I think some electronic shifting now does it like automatically for you, right?
ETAP, the Axis ETAP, and DI2 does it.
Yeah. So fancy automatic stuff that it can shift for you. But getting into the race strategy question, this is something that I always find interesting, and I guess that people always talk about it when they see like Chris Froome looking at his stem, because they assume he's just staring at his head unit, and they forget that he's just probably deep in the hurt box, right? And that's what happens. You just look down. But a good plan, and like, riding by numbers, when people talk about that, it shouldn't really, I can't think of a single time, well, maybe 1 or 2 times, but at the end of the race, I was grateful for it, where I felt like my power plan was holding me back. I always feel like I'm striving to hit my power plan. Like, it's hard to, right? It's not just as easy as like, I'm just going to ride at this wattage, just make it say that number. And I think that on mountain biking specifically, like, it's really, it's kind of tricky there. How do you lay out like a plan? When you look at Carson City Off-Road, for example, since we have that race this weekend, is your pacing, like, what do you consider when you lay out your strategy for the race?
My strategy is, my only strategy I have is actually what I'm going to eat. when it comes to the race, there's just so I can't control how other people are going to race. I can't control when people are going to attack, when someone's going to slow down the pace, when someone's going to have a mechanical or any of that stuff. For me, I think I'm still at the point where seeing my numbers, it's a limiter because I'm like, oh, I can't do this. And, you know, last year I thought these epic rides, like, don't really go into zone 4, like stay away from zone 5. And I realized, no, you got to race these races, 2 90-minute cross-country races.
Yeah,
like, you just cannot hold back.
Yeah.
So like on this, it just really depends the type of rider you are. If you're all about the numbers, like Keegan, for example, he's like, I know I can do this watt for this amount of time, and this is my happy place. And there are other people that are like, no, I'm just going to go by RPE. And some people are like, no, heart rate. So I think it just really depends on kind of what type of rider you are.
Yeah.
And it matters where in the race, because you're going to win or podium, right?
Yes.
If you're in 200th place, it's very easy that everyone ahead of you is more fit than you, and you can't just go with everyone because it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's not going to work out well.
But I, Sophia, I think in your case, sometimes too, with pros, it's okay if you blow up. You'd rather blow up and have a chance for a podium than get 15th place and, you know, be and not go with the move.
Yeah, and I think if anything, the only strategy is like, okay, where do you want to burn your matches? Do you want to go with the lead group right away? Are you taking the chance that maybe they're not going to slow down, or maybe you stay back and you're like, okay, once they get to the single track, pace is going to slow down. But yeah, it's just everything is so unpredictable.
What is your strategy with that in women's racing? Does it often where a group will go up the road and you let that go and you don't up the dirt?
Yeah, or does it stay more together? Like, how does it usually break down, I guess, for you?
Near the single track, there'll be kind of like a 4-minute VO2 surge. So you have to actually be pretty warmed up for it. Cause
that's hard.
Yeah, in the first like 15 minutes, you go from like really easy on the road to like full VO2. And then it's going to be a constant like LT sweet spot type of effort for all the climbs. And then on the fire roads here, we have a lot, so there's going to be a lot of drafting involved. And if the wind is as bad as it was yesterday, like I was alone, and I was like, oh, this is not okay.
Yeah, it was in our face the whole way up the climb. Yeah.
And in that moment, you're like, well, I didn't want to ride this hard, but it's either you're going to go a little bit harder and stay with a group, or you're going to be by yourself and lose a lot more time.
So a lot of your strategy has to come up on the fly. I mean, you can go into it with a plan, but as soon as anything affects it, and something will, you have to modify. Which begs the question, maybe I don't even start with strategy.
Yeah, when you look at like a really good professor, for example, what the professor does is he makes sure that he knows the material inside and out. He makes sure he knows his audience, and then he makes sure he has principles of being able to deliver that down. Yeah. But he doesn't say, like, this is every single word that I'm going to say throughout this lecture. A good professor, I'm saying. And that's kind of like, I feel like the same thing. You're pre-writing the course. You know your strengths and weaknesses. You know your competition. And then, like you said, you're going to have a nutrition plan, and that's in place. And your equipment's taken care of. Like, you're very aware of all of those things. You figured all of those out. You know that it can shake down in any number of ways. So you're just going to, you know everything, and then after that, you're going to make sure you execute on the right principles, which, there are certain things that you understand. Like, for example, if it's early on in a race and a rider that you know is probably not capable of going that hard so early on and making it last the whole race, that's, once again, one of those situations where you think, okay, maybe I don't chase this down, right? But if you have this strict plan that you adhere to, like, this is my strategy, and I will execute exactly how it goes.
Limiting.
Exactly right. It can be really tough.
For those 4 minutes of VO2 max before the single track, is that because there's a fight for position to go into the single track?
Yes.
Yeah. Does that happen in most all the races?
Yeah.
Like fighting for it?
Yep.
What about fighting for position coming into a descent? Do women fight for that too?
Yeah, and it really depends how that climb ends. If it's a fire road, like at Whiskey 50, when you're climbing Skull Valley, you get to the top and then you get into a little single track. We are sprinting for that position. Like, we are going so hard because it really matters, especially if you have a rider in front of you that it doesn't descend as fast. You're like, well, I need to get in front of them, because otherwise you're just losing time that doesn't really take you any effort.
Yeah. Do you pull over for each other? Like, if someone was slower in front of you, do they get out of the way?
Not really, I would say. I mean, maybe further back in the
Yeah,
pack,
the pointy end.
Yeah.
No, but not like the top 5 or top 10.
No way. Unless
No way.
you're like teammates. Like, if it was Chloe and I felt like Chloe was stronger in the descent, I'd be like, come on, Chloe, like, get by and I'll follow you.
Yeah.
But most of the time, no.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So on this question, though, for Chris, what we just talked about was all for racing to win.
Yes.
If you're
it's
racing
different.
a time trial, just do the best speed you can.
Yes.
I think it's a different strategy.
Yeah,
It
under
is.
different circumstances, you can definitely strategize. If you know,
yeah.
I don't care how long it takes me, this is my power goal, that's what I'm doing.
Or
Yep.
you have a time goal.
Or time goal.
Because you can't, Chris, like the when you're racing, how do I say this? When you're racing at the top of the, for the women's, like you all know how strong everyone is, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've raced with people, and where Chris would be in a race,
He doesn't know.
he doesn't know. John's gonna be next to me,
Yep.
and John starts going hard, and like, oh, he's VO2 max for 4 minutes. John's like, no, this is my 2-hour pace.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing with this too is that, like you mentioned, Keegan, and Keegan is strong enough to be able to race these races in some regards how he wants
Yep.
and get a win. And if we're so privileged to be in that position, that's incredible. Because in that case, you do have a strategy, because you're going to have to decide how the race shakes down, because you are the main person that's going to decide that.
Do you
right?
ever learn your competitors to a point where you know that someone's kind of a spotty performer, whereas someone else is super consistent? I mean,
I think in our women's field, we're all, at least at the pointy end, we're all pretty
highly consistent. Yeah.
and you just know who's really strong climber, who's great kind of overall, who's a good descender, and vice versa, like where their weaknesses are.
Are you surprised then when they have a bad day? So it's not something you can bank on. She's hit or miss. More often than not, she has a bad day, so she's going out hard. I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah.
As opposed to I'm having a bad day. I know I can't hang on to this. I'm gonna rein it in. I mean,
Yeah, I can understand what you're getting at here is the fact that, like, when you see a person do a hard move like that, you don't know
what sort of day that rider's
exactly
having.
right. Yeah, that's the hard thing.
And what sort of day you're having at
Yeah.
that point too. So, all I'm trying to get at is that strategizing is, again, it's just such a difficult thing to do when there are so many variables in play.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So for Chris,
Yes.
I got tips.
Yeah, absolutely.
The two things I think Chris should be concerned about is, one, drafting, and two, any position on the course where it's single track, where he could be blocked by slower riders.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like Leadville, you don't ever get blocked. Maybe there's like 3 minutes of being blocked out of 9 hours, but drafting is a huge concern in the flat section. So those would be the only times that I would push harder, Chris. Other than that, man, if you on these long races like that, if you hold back at the beginning, and your overall RP, it'll feel so much easier, but you'll go faster.
Yes.
Than when you go out really hard at the beginning, and then the whole race is like a slog.
Because keep in mind, this is basically a time trial for him, because he's going for a time goal, right?
Yep.
So, like, you might want to fight for position when you get to single track, but other than that, you do want to stay within yourself.
Yeah,
like
and
you're
only
saying.
if you're good. Like, don't fight for position on the downhill single
Yes.
track if you're going to have to be pulling over all the time for people.
Yeah,
that
it's going to be worse for everybody.
It's worse for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
The only thing I'll add to that is put a strategy, control what you can control. Control your nutrition, control your equipment, control your feeds, control all those things that actually do take a big impact on your race.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, control what you can. Nate. Once again, Nate, you can just ask us. You don't have to submit questions. He says, hey, guys, love the podcast and all the work Trainer Road has been putting in the analytics and calendar side of things. The new outdoor workouts feature is also awesome, which leads me to my question. I'm a fairly experienced triathlete, and this year I've noticed that I'm having trouble holding sustained power at race pace outdoors. I just did Pioneer Plus 2 outside, and the target range had me in the sweet spot range for around 45 minutes. Even when I tried to keep it in that range, he says, even when I try to keep that in that range, my average power for that time outdoors is around 20 watts lower than the low end of the range. I've seen this in races all season as well. Could this be because this is a first season I've had the Smart Trainer using erg mode? So we're going to get into, he asks a bunch of different other questions, but like getting straight into it. His main thing is talking about really getting better at sustained power, especially when you're riding outside. And when we're talking about riding outside and you have like those fluctuations, I know you do a fair amount of motor pacing, and this kind of teaches you to do that, or you've done some. You have the scooter with the roller.
It's just Keegan.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, a lot of the time is Keegan.
Yeah, just riding behind Keegan. How have you gotten better, or have you noticed that it's hard to get good at putting out power over rolling terrain, that sort of stuff, like sustained power, and what tips have you used to get better at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think on one of the things in this question, I'm like, 20 watts. How big are you? What's your weight? Because 20 watts for someone like Nate is like petty. It's like nothing.
Yeah.
Or
Nothing.
for me, 20 watts. I'm like, okay, that could be quite a big difference in zone. But you know, I normally try to look at my normalized power for my endurance rides just to account for the descending, because there's no way I could do, you know, upper zone 2 for 3 hours, especially where I live, where we have so much climbing and descending. So it's kind of like look at normalized power and then, just kind of, it is what it is, you know, pedal hard. And if you're 20 watts lower, you're 20 watts lower. Like it, to me, it doesn't really affect you.
I think a lot of people leave low-hanging fruit, and when we're talking about holding, let's say you're trying to hold 200 watts and you're going over rollers, you'll find that it's probably a lot harder to hold that. It's easy on the climb when it's going up, and it's a lot harder to hold it when it goes flat and downhill. And like that's, I mean, something that I'm sure, Nate, you're a pretty good time trialist. You're good at holding steady power. You've done triathlon, that sort of stuff. How did you get better at doing that?
You just practice it. I think I know I've done some half Ironmans where I think in one, I think my average power was like, or normalized was like 230. My average though was like 225, flatter course.
That's impressive.
But triathletes, you can do that. And you're just always shifting and just staring at your power meter and never stop pedaling. But the thing that Nate has to realize too is when you stop pedaling outdoors, you get a 0. And for math, when you get when you're going 300, 300, 300, 300, you get a 0. That pulls your average down so fast, like so hard. That's why we look at normalized power outside. So in a triathlon, you might be, or even outside, as you said, if you like coast for 10 seconds as you're like eating something out of your pocket, that's going to lower your average power by a lot. You know, you watch the pros too, they eat and drink and even pee on the bike while they're pedaling. Which is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. This is something where I found that the big thing for me, if I'm trying to hold a steady target, like in this case he is, it's really about not going as hard as, or holding back on the up, and then making sure that you're very, very disciplined over the top and on the down. And that's also a great way to be able to drop people in a race, is when you can keep the power over the top, right? And that's something I'm sure you've been good at, just being a bigger guy, that sort of a thing, and focusing on TTs.
And pushing the downhills. That works too. But I think a lot of riders don't recognize when they come from an indoor environment how easy it is to keep steady power on a trainer. And then they get out on a course that even perceptibly looks really flat, how many micro changes there are, and how you can't possibly stay a little easy on the ups and a little harder on the downs when they're coming so frequently, and you almost don't notice them. So it is very much a learned skill. You get really good at riding a trainer. You can get really good at being steady on the open road. It has to be practiced though.
I've noticed that juniors, especially, they really seem to struggle with this. Like younger riders, they're great at going, and they're usually their power to weight ratio is crazy, so they're really good at going hard on climbs, and it really hurts. But then anytime it gets flat or downhill, you know, putting out 200 watts when you're going on the flat or downhill feels a lot harder than 200 watts when you're going up.
And a lot of the times it doesn't even make sense, not in a race scenario. But in a training scenario where you're trying to stay on top of the weight, well, ideally don't pick courses like that where you have to drill the downhill. Rather pick flatter courses. But if you do notice that the road is trending downward, you're going to have to get on top of it. It takes a lot of conscious effort.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's worth considering that maybe he's got a position difference too, right? Like maybe he's, you know, in an aero position, or maybe the aero position is just slightly differently held when he's riding inside versus outside.
Yeah, there's a lot of incentive to be more aerodynamic when you're outside, even if you don't recognize that you're doing it.
Yeah. And if anybody's looking to get better at this, I do recommend, you know, working. And first of all, the trainer is a great way to build this, I feel like, because you just spend extended periods of time and you're at the same power, right? And then if you're riding outside, I think motor pacing is great. And if you tell the person, try to pick a rolling road, you know, nothing that's like crazy steep. But if it's like something that has micro fluctuations, and just be like, peg that thing at 24 and do not budge, right? And I will be right on your wheel. You'll realize that, like, man, are you sure you're not going 34 when you're going like flat and downhill? Because it feels that way. But it's a great way to build that up.
It's a bit luxurious. It's not available to a whole lot of riders.
Or just find a fast person.
Exactly.
Yeah, that works. That absolutely works. Or just ride in a group.
Right. Josh's question says, love the podcast. I recently had a 30-mile rolling road race as a Cat 5 in upstate New York. After getting dropped by the fast group, I settled in with a group of about 10 to 12 riders. Everyone was calling for us to work together, but there seemed to be no cohesion. That's super weird. I've never heard of
Cat 5?
Yeah,
What?
it's strange, huh? He says, the group seemed pretty dysfunctional, and in my experience, riding in a pack definitely contributed to the the trouble. The question is, in a situation where I want to get away from the group but don't have the fitness to drop them, what do I do? Do I sit in? Do I attack? I ended up taking a flyer just to see what would happen, and I got caught with 300 meters to go and went from 15th place to 25th place. And that's actually, maybe that was the right move for him to do, because 15th to 25th, there's probably not a whole lot of difference.
Doomed strategy.
He says, as an aside, my legs weren't feeling too good that day, but I set a bunch of power PRs, and I have Trainer Road to thank for that. Awesome. Thanks for all you do. Good job, Josh.
Yeah, anytime you don't have the fitness to hang with a bunch, attack. Seriously.
It'll work out great.
Yeah, absolutely don't do that.
Yeah.
That's probably the worst thing you can do. I do like that you tried it, though.
Yeah.
And saw what came of it. Just threw something at the wall, saw if it stuck, and it didn't. But you got close, and you probably got a better placing than you would have if you sat in and just tried to sprint it out with a really dangerous group at that point.
Yeah, so there's two things that I see here. One, first let's talk about you're in the second group. Doesn't really probably matter. You're probably not worried about another group catching you. It's dysfunctional. I would kind of do what you did is I would not pull. I would sit in. And then when there is a time, if you're a sprinter, I'd wait for it. But if you're not a sprinter, as Jeff said before, don't wait for the sprint.
Yeah. Never a good idea
I
when
just
you're
did
not
that
a
on
sprinter.
Tuesday and got out sprinted. You got to go early and do that. But the other part, I think this is more general, that happens to a lot of us is you're in a breakaway in the lead, and there's people in there you can't beat, right? Or at least the way that it's unfolding, you can't beat them, especially if you're pulling through. This happens with Jose as a local rider, incredible sprinter.
Yes.
And if we do a pace line until the finish, he will win. I think every time.
Every time.
I don't
It's
think
gonna be
he's
extremely hard
lost
to beat him.
locally that way.
Yeah.
So in that situation, when there's people in the group that can beat you in your breakaway, you don't have to pull. Like this, you can sabotage it. That's what I would do.
And what do you mean by sabotage?
Well, so not
We should
sabotage.
be clear.
Yeah,
no bottles and wheels. Or
Here are
something
your
like
options. One, when you pull through, you can pull through way less than you normally would. All right, so you're saving energy. People might pick up on that. Two, you can get to the point where you say, you're on the back and you say, I'm not pulling. You guys can do it. You're going to out-sprint me.
Yep.
I'm not pulling you to the line so you can out-sprint me.
Yeah.
And
if you want to be more coy about it, skip a pull every other pull, something like that, and blame it on something like tightening your shoe.
Ham it up. Pretend like you're suffering.
Yep.
People, if you sit on the back, people will get mad, but this isn't a group ride, people, where you're sharing the work. It's okay. And especially sometimes you don't even worry about the group behind. This happens locally with us sometimes too, is there's disparity between the fast and the medium people.
Yeah.
And you could be 45 seconds up the road, and if they do get close, it'll open up again. You're really just racing against that small group of people rather than, if you got a 15-second gap, you have to go or else it's not going to happen unless you don't want to be even in that break. Yeah. And that can be okay too. Jeff Linder from NorCal Cycling, he has all those sprint videos.
Awesome.
He said this happens to him now. This happens a lot more, I think, in the upper racing because in the lower racing, people like say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. What are you doing? And then it gets in your brain, you don't do it. But Jeff said if he is in a breakaway right now because he's won so many sprints.
And he has a YouTube channel.
Exactly. So people know who he is now.
Great strategy, Jeff. You're marked.
NorCal Cycling videos. People don't pull.
Yeah.
They're like, why would I want to be in a breakaway with you?
Yeah.
So why would you want to, the same reason, even if you're Cat 5, why would you want to be in a breakaway with someone who's going to beat you no matter what if your goal is to win?
Yeah.
If your goal is to get some points, top 5, maybe it is that, and there's 5 people in the breakaway, you definitely want to go all in, and it's okay not to win.
Yeah, basically everything you just said comes down to riding defensively. You have to recognize you're not riding to maintain group cohesion. You're riding to protect yourself, to preserve your stores, your energy, so that you have some chance. And maybe it doesn't make you popular. Maybe you have to do things you're not real happy about, but sorry, you want to win a race and you're the weakest, or at least a weaker rider out there, you're going to have to protect yourself.
Yeah.
There are 2 points that I want to make on this one. Then we're going to go into fat tire crit strategy, and you can totally lie. So then, your competitors, because I'm sure they're listening. So
all of them.
Yeah, exactly. So 2 things. First of all, in this case, Josh, you're not like what Nate was saying here. You're probably the weakest one, like you said, because you weren't strong enough to probably beat them. So what do you do? And the main thing that I think is you can make moves in races that are absolutely the right moves. And sometimes they don't work out. And they don't work out because there's going to be one person that's fast enough to win that race.
Yeah.
Sometimes you aren't the fastest and you can win the race, and it's awesome. But it doesn't. So I think that a lot of the time we feel like just because you attacked, you tried, you got caught with 300 to go, and you feel like you might be tempted to feel like that was the wrong move. Maybe it was the right move. It's just you didn't have what it takes to go. But it might have been your best chance.
It's unwinnable sometimes.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
It really comes down to you looking at the situation with the group and saying, where is the best chance for me to have success? And then you have to go all in on that. It's not about winning every time, because sometimes you just can't. You're not going to be able to beat them. But it's really cool to be able to recognize where you have your best chance and then exploit that. And hey, sometimes it works out.
Yeah, I think Josh probably did exactly that. He probably did a move that would have been successful if he had slightly more fitness, or maybe slightly fresher legs. Maybe he had ridden the race slightly differently up to that point.
Or I think a lot of this is the reaction of the field.
Oh yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Totally.
If the field looked at each other and they I think this is the best case. If people race with each other a lot, they don't know you or they don't think you're fast, that's the best to do a long bomb like that, because they look at each other, look at each other to cover, and then it gets extended. Then they really want the other person to cover because they know there's going to be a counter.
Yep.
Or be the guy who keeps flinging out attacks and keeps failing at them, because over time people will start to write you off. And as soon as you go off the road, it's like, oh, there he goes again.
Yep.
And then that may be just that extra bit of hesitation from the field that nets you the win.
That's a great point.
I did that for a whole season besides the point races in Twilight on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did attacks and just came back.
Feign.
Make people think
Get
you're
a workout.
foolish.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone thought it, but probably thought it the bullet. Yeah.
It's that tall idiot again. Just let him go.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, looking at the fat tire crits, that's as tactical as racing gets for you. How do you work out strategy for fat tire crits? Is it simply about just marking people? Does it change course to course? And we can use Carson as the example in this case.
Yeah. There's the only for these 4 fat tire crits that we have, like the first one is kind of the outlier because we actually have a hill. So that one, little less strategy, more just like make it to the top of the hill with the group every time. But Grand
And
Junction.
if I can interrupt really quick, you can see Keegan's video where he races that one, and we have race analysis with it. It's brilliant.
YouTube.com/trainerroad.
Yes, it's awesome.
Yep. But then the next 3, which is Grand Junction, Carson, and Bentonville, for the most part, they're flat. You have maybe a false flat climb. So tactics play quite a bit of a role. And on top of that, we have preems. $200 preems. I think it's like first lap, and then there's 2 other ones, and then one for the win.
Those are preems worth chasing too.
Yeah, $200 is worth chasing.
Exactly. I've been in so many times, and I'm like, I'm just going to go for the first lap, and then I'll be done, right? I know I don't have it to win today, so might as well make some money, buy some beers and
Buddies do
burritos.
exactly that. It's a great idea.
Nate went for the prestigious Trainer Road free month preem this week.
Yeah, apparently I got it. I didn't know. But I won a
Nailed it, yeah.
3-month premium.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But no, it's okay. But basically those races now with the preems, and this is the only thing I don't like about it, they're really predictable.
Yeah.
There's going to be one person that takes a flyer on the first lap, and then maybe a lap later we catch them. Then around 7 minutes we're going to have another preem, and then someone is purposely not going to go for the preem, and they're going to counterattack.
Yes.
So then that creates a breakaway. Then the third preem is only for the chasing group because they want to just keep it interesting.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I already know how the race is going to play out.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you do. It probably will.
Are you going to get in the breakaway then?
Oh, that's the plan, yeah. But I also like to win the preems. So
breakaway and preems and win. Why not?
Yeah, why not, right?
Take 'em all.
Yeah, but I think they're becoming pretty predictable. And that's the only thing I'm a little bit bummed with the preems.
Yeah.
But yeah, you kind of know when people are going to go. And we've raced here, we've done it for 2 years. I've done it for 2, and you kind of know also the places where people attack and have been successfully gone away and where they have not.
Yeah.
So it's, but then, right, again, that makes it more strategy. You're like, okay, well, if this is the outcome we all think this is how the race is going to play out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not going to wait for a preem to do an attack. Maybe you do one like when you think it's going to be like 2 laps before a preem.
That predictability is only going to stand up for so long before people start challenging it or playing off
Exactly.
Yep.
It becomes a known factor, and known factors are what you can work against, right?
Yeah.
So as many known factors as you can have in a race, the better, because then you just insert the uncertainty where it doesn't belong.
Be the wild card.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That'll be interesting. Hopefully we can stream this live. Fingers crossed everything works out with that. That would be really fun. If not, we're still going to have the videos. And thanks to Todd Sadow at Epic Rides for allowing the riders to film these races, because it doesn't always happen at UCI races. Sometimes you aren't allowed to do it. We try, but
I don't know why not. It just raises the race's prestige because more people see it then and know about the race.
It's way more engaging. It's only good for the sport.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Don't understand. So, but thanks, Todd. Thanks for doing it. Okay, next one is from Emilius. I hope that's how you say the name. Says, just a question that got me thinking. Is muscle pain during recovery proportional to the training load or quality?
Simple question, simple answer. Yes or no?
Answer. We'll give you a couple simple answers, and then I'll just talk about, I'll just dive into something a little more technical.
Yeah, we're going to get deep into this one. So I guess like simply asking, and I'm going to rephrase the question once again, is muscle pain during recovery proportional to the training load or quality? So really the assumption here is if I train more or I have higher quality training, I am always more sore. Like it has a
Or how about this?
relationship.
If I'm not sore, am I training?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point. So let's get a couple points out of the way before we even dive into the subtopic. First, Nate put on here no gain without pain, and that's a good point to bring up because that
question mark.
Yeah, exactly. As a question mark, as a question, and that's I think a hard thing for a lot of riders to wrap their heads around. They feel like every work has to be completely deflating, and they have to thrash themselves if they're going to see some fruitful benefit from it. And that's absolutely not the case. I mean, some athletes don't ever hurt themselves and only get faster.
Oh yeah,
to a point.
Right.
So you don't have to associate gains of performance with painful workouts. It's not a necessity.
Something that Pete and I were mentioning to we were discussing this just a couple weeks ago now with you.
Yeah.
We don't really feel much muscle soreness. I don't really feel a whole lot of it.
Yeah, and I'll explain that in a little bit.
I should say. Yeah. If I like pick up strength training after not doing it for a long time.
Yep.
You've mentioned that, right, Sophia?
Oh my goodness, it hurts. But then you're like, wow, like when I'm riding, all these muscles are working. Like you don't really realize it when you don't have that muscle soreness.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's a wonderful thing to achieve.
Yeah.
And then I just want to draw a distinction between pain and soreness. I mean, being sore is one thing, being in pain is another. And I'm going to assume you're talking about soreness, but if it's pain, it needs to be addressed. Most likely going to involve a physician. If it's soreness, it should abate. If it eventually goes away, you're okay. Get back at it, and we'll talk very, very much about soreness.
Cool.
And then I'm also going to make the other assumption that we're talking about endurance training here, not strength training. Because I know strength training is kind of a hot topic with us lately, but I'm going to guess he's talking about endurance, and I'm going to roll with that assumption for about an hour. So buckle up. No, I'm just kidding. It's not that long. Okay, so what we are going to talk about is DOMS, D-O-M-S, delayed onset muscle soreness. And basically it's just that. It's delayed onset and your muscles hurt. It doesn't happen right away. It's typically about, I'll get more specific on this, it's later. Okay, so not immediately after the workout. And what I found, so I was going to dive pretty deep into one particular theory because I didn't realize there were so many theories, and then really dive into the immune response because that's my personal hot topic lately, and I'm just itching to share my knowledge on this new area of interest. But I'm going to rein it back in, I guess, and discuss the other theories as well. So the first one and probably the most prominent theory is that of mechanical stress, and we hear about it all the time: muscle microtrauma. They're microscopic tears. You dealt with muscle trauma on a micro scale. And specifically what that is if you're familiar with muscle physiology, you get down to the muscles within the muscles, and we're talking about the overlapping myofilaments. You've probably heard about actin and myosin, maybe titin. And excuse me, all that happens is, like I said, they're muscles within muscles, and they're demarcated by what are called Z lines. And when you damage those Z lines, is apparently, or according to this theory, what causes the inflammation. The inflammation is the immune insult, and then the immune response is what causes DOMS.
Yeah.
The muscle soreness.
I think that's like similar. That's kind of like the. Is it fair to say that's the widely accepted theory? Because I feel like I've heard that one.
That's the one you see most, for sure. In fact, that's why I was going to run with this until I started digging into it and realized how many conflicting theories there were.
Oh boy.
Which actually got really interesting. So I wouldn't be boring you with all of this. So the idea here is, and also I should mention that they typically tie this to eccentric contractions. Okay, so contractions that are taking place when the muscle is lengthening, rather than when the muscle is shortening, or in an isometric non-changing state. So muscles getting longer. This apparently lends itself to greater damage to these Z lines, to the sarcomeres, to the fibers. and initiates this whole immune response and the inflammation that comes with it. So their contention, or this model's contention, or theory's contention, is that it's fiber related too. So type 2s, because they can exert high force, can undergo greater damage, and it's the damage in your mechanical nociceptors, so the little pain sensors within your muscle that are eliciting or prompting the irritation, causing the pain.
Makes sense.
The brain's interpretation of it. And that type 1 fibers don't undergo this same level of damage because a couple of things: they have greater heat shock proteins. They have a lower mechanical stress limit. They can't exert as much force. So they just don't put themselves in the same position, supposedly. Problem is, DOMS can be accomplished via long, slow distance. There's plenty of evidence of it.
Yep,
plenty of people have gone through this.
Yeah, I've Everested before, actually. I felt it then.
Really?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll tell you all about it. Yeah.
So back to the inflammatory response. Typically, it happens within 45 minutes, peaks at about 2 hours, and this is when you look down, you start to see, and you can notice swelling, edema on the affected muscles, particularly the interstitial fluid. All the fluid that bathes the muscle fibers is pumping up, so to speak. The plasma is donating more fluid to it. This brings with it all sorts of immune response: phagocytes, macrophages, neutrophils, T lymphocytes, all things I was going to get into, talk about immune-mediated cell death and signaling of cytokines and all this interesting stuff that, again, I want to talk about, but couldn't get behind because I'm not sure I trust this theory. I don't think it's the strongest of the ones that I'm going to tell you about. So what they did show more often than not is that DOMS is not a direct result of muscle inflammation. You can have inflammation without pain. You can have pain without inflammation, maybe. So inflammation is there. There is muscle damage, but is that actually what's causing the muscle soreness? That's the question, and they can't answer it. They haven't got good answers. I think it's Delia, I don't know, Deyhle, in 2015 talked about repeated bouts. And so they do the initial exercise that made him sore, and then a few weeks later come back and do the same thing. And that's the repeated bout. And there was a great reduction in pain. They didn't have DOMS again, but they did still have the same level, if not a higher level, of inflammation.
Oh, yeah.
So the inflammation was there, but the muscle soreness was not.
That's interesting because I've felt that before. Like, don't
See
go
it all the
hiking
time.
for a long time and then go hiking when you're just like this person that just rides a bike, like us.
Yeah.
And you'll be like crazy sore, but then you could go hiking again in 3 weeks or so, or a week, something like that. You don't get the same, pain feeling thereafter.
Yeah,
But
and you might endure the same level of muscle trauma too. You might have the same level of immune response. You may have the same level of swelling, but the soreness magically isn't there.
I think weight training is a good example of that because on hiking it could be at the same intensity, but you still go to failure for your 8 reps or whatever. But I remember the first time, I think you ever had it where you work out so hard where your arms are stuck, you can't put them out all the way.
I did CrossFit, and we did what were the kipping pull-ups, and then I basically walked around like a T-Rex for like seriously a week.
CrossFit's easily the biggest offender, and they manage to do it in such a way that you experience this all the time. They fly in the face of all these theories somehow on how they do it.
DOMS year round. That's what you want.
In high school, I had this happen with my calves, and I had to walk on my tippy toes, no joke, for a week because I couldn't straighten them enough because they were so tight.
It extends out to there have been instances of as long as 10 days, 10-day effects.
Yeah.
Jeez,
so you can really overdo it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so like I said, there's a number of theories going to talk about them, which tells you there's a high level of disagreement. There is agreement on certain things, and one of them is that inflammation does lead to adaptation, and this is why we don't want to blunt that inflammation with things like NSAIDs or antioxidant foods or antioxidant supplements, that sort of thing. We want to let the inflammation run its course so we get the benefit, because when that happens, we're getting satellite cell activity. So on the outside of muscle cells, there are these little stem cells that will donate nuclei to the muscle so that it can form more cells. More cells mean more protein synthesis, bigger, stronger muscles, etc. And when we interrupt that inflammatory process, we're causing ourselves the very adaptation we're seeking. We've talked about that a number of times. So in addition, exercise-induced muscle damage alters gene expression. We've talked about that too, where when you strength train, when you do anything that pushes you, anything unfamiliar, it tells you which genes to switch on, which ones to switch off, and the signaling goes forward and adaptation follows.
Yeah, it's not static. That's something that we change.
Yep. But does this cause the muscle soreness? Does this inflammation, does any of this cause the muscle soreness? And one of the schools of opposition says that no, because low intensity work that comes with no or low inflammation can also lead to delayed onset muscle soreness. Another form of opposition comes in that there's metabolic causes and there's also psychological influences. So let's talk about the metabolic stress.
Cool.
There has been no demonstrated link between delayed onset muscle soreness and particular muscle metabolites. So the what gets what's the other side of metabolic processes, whether aerobic or anaerobic? These things, they can't find any of those in particular that causes delayed onset muscle soreness. DOMS. I'm just going to say DOMS from now on. But Pollock in 2014 showed that when protons are present, lactate's present, and ATP's present, all three are present at once, there was a correlation between that and muscle soreness.
Not saying that it's the cause, but there's a correlation.
The combination, yeah, it's multifaceted, and that's pretty much the whole gist of what I'm going to share with you, or am sharing with you. And they also showed that there are molecules that are present before the workout and after the workout that could figure into it. So it's not just metabolites, it's not just outcome, it's stuff that comes in or starts the process or is there present prior to the process also. Growing evidence that reactive oxygen species or antioxidants have something to do with it, though it's not a direct cause. They can be present, they can be in high levels, but they don't necessarily correlate directly with muscle soreness, but there's something there. And then there's a 2008 study that showed that simple metabolic strain and long fatiguing endurance work, just go for a long time, creates DOMS, muscle soreness. And what was interesting about that is the DOMS was there, and therefore, the adaptation that followed and the repeat bout effect, which I'll talk about in a little bit, was also there, but there was no visible muscle damage. So now we don't even have damage, but we still have muscle soreness.
Yep.
Again.
Yeah.
So conclusion here is DOMS is not a direct result of metabolic stress either. If
I'm confused.
We're lost.
I know.
Pull us out,
It
Chad.
gets worse. And I'm going to try to save it.
Oh, boy.
I don't know how well I'm going to do. Third theory, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly, is called the enzyme efflux theory. It has to do with calcium accumulation, but I found that particularly interesting because there's a whole, I don't think it's a new school of thought, but there's a whole set of research that shows that muscle burn may be tied to calcium accumulation rather than blood acidification. I don't know. So I didn't dive too deeply into that, but I did want to note it.
Yeah.
And then the fourth theory is the lactic acid theory,
Which is very commonly
and
shared.
I'm just going to say no, because if you haven't learned that by now, you're never going to learn it, and you're beyond hope. So give up.
Whoa,
And
harsh, Chad.
I also want us to stop using the term lactic acid because it demonizes what lactate actually is, and for what it's worth, lactic acid is never present in the bloodstream anyway. Lactate and hydrogen are.
Yes.
But as soon as lactic acid touches the blood, or I don't know where in the process it happens, it dissociates into those two components.
Yes.
So you may have lactic acidosis in that those two components rise and cause an acidification of the blood, but it's not due to lactic acid, it's due to lactate and hydrogen.
Yes, exactly.
So anyway, no more lactic acid. Now when we're talking about endurance performance. And then two left. This fifth one, they purport that maybe it's a mild form of rhabdomyolysis.
I've wondered that too.
Yeah.
I've wondered if I'm
this one,
stepping into the bounds of rhabdo.
yeah, this one makes a little more sense to me.
What's Rhabdo?
So rhabdo is when basically you endure, typically it's related to crushed muscle.
I was going to say
But
CrossFit.
it can also happen with...
What is it? CrossFit.
It can also happen with extreme workouts. It can also happen with really severe massage.
Yeah.
So, and basically what's happening is it's a form of kidney poisoning, and that there's too much myoglobin released from the damaged muscle, and the myoglobin itself, they can't measure the myoglobin. They measure what's called CPK, and you've probably seen this at some point in time, which is phosphocreatine kinase, and this is a good marker for exactly this sort of damage. So if your CPK levels are high, we can say, this is something that needs to be addressed. It's not something you want to experience all the time. And I think back to a buddy of mine was going to nationals, and he did a particularly hard workout a couple days prior, just a tune-up. Then he went to his sports physician, and his physician asked him after doing blood work, he's like, man, did you just get in a car crash or deal with some form of blunt force trauma because your CPK levels are off the charts? And he's like, no, I just did a couple hard workouts.
Yeah.
So-
And it's worth saying also, he's an incredible athlete that can go extremely deep.
He is. Yeah.
That's that guy. When I think of this athlete, that's his strength. He probably
He can do that,
deeper
and
than
that's
anybody I've
it
seen.
too. And he has big power too. So he's asking a lot of those muscles.
Yeah, so when he says just a couple hard workouts, I don't want people to think that they do a couple hard
No,
workouts
no.
and this is what they have.
No.
This guy is absolutely unique.
It's the extreme end of
Been at
things.
nationals multiple times to another.
Yes.
And
And he-
380,
and he's a-
390 FTP.
And he's a big guy.
He's a big guy,
Yeah.
and he still has. So he has times on Tour of California climbs that have come through that are still ranking like top 15, and he's a big guy.
We're talking about Scott Leland, so I'll just put the name out there.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
So this myoglobin's in high levels, and it's not a threat until it reaches the kidneys, at which point it can cause kidney damage, kidney failure, and that's why Rhabdo is taken so seriously, because of the threat to the kidneys.
Yeah.
So the theory here is that it's a mild form of Rhabdo.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that one stands up. But the one I'm going to go ahead and hitch my wagon to, I guess is the term, is one that has to do with neurotrophic factors. And in this case, we're really talking about nerve growing pains. So neurotrophic factors are substances that are secreted by the muscles, and they basically spur nerve growth.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that there's an observable, what's called a mechanical hyperalgesia, which is just muscle pain, an observable muscle pain in the absence of visible damage. Again, touched on this earlier. So it says if the damage isn't there, it's obviously not causing the pain. We've kind of got to the point where it's clear that the inflammation is not causing the pain. So it's really, I mean, a whole pain is in the brain sort of argument. And the repeated bout effect supports this because there are a couple of really interesting studies. One that showed that it's not proportionate. They had one group of athletes do 10, they call them contractions, but we're talking repetitions, okay? So 10 repetitions or 20 repetitions or 50 repetitions. All of them dealt with a certain level of soreness. They came back 3 weeks later. All of them did 50 repetitions. All of them had the same level of soreness after those 50 repetitions, which wasn't much for what it's worth. So whether they did 10 repetitions in preparation for this 3 weeks later endeavor or the full 50, they all responded the same way in terms of the level of pain that they dealt with afterward. And then another one that's super interesting is when they train a single leg. They have a study, they've done studies where they train one side of the body, one leg, one arm, and the muscle soreness is felt in the other unexercised limb.
Whoa.
And then
it's crazy.
Weeks later, or during subsequent workouts, that muscle responds in the same way. It doesn't get sore. It's the worked limb overcame the soreness, and the unworked limb overcame the soreness, even though it didn't get exposed to the supposed stimulus.
You blew my mind.
Right? How interesting is that?
That's nuts.
So all this,
single leg drills all day.
Yeah, you only need to do one of them. You have to do both.
No, just not to be sore. Not to be sore. It's
Right.
not to see you got stronger in both legs. Although there is some evidence to support that too, which is crazy.
More brain breaking.
Which just only furthers the point that there are no truths in science. Just knowledge. It's just knowledge. All we're doing is informing ourselves, putting theories up there and trying to break them down. The longer they stand up, the stronger they become.
So what things, I guess, do you agree with on all this?
Well, I don't agree with anything, or I do, but this is where the consensus lies. One thing is that when it happens, typically peaks anywhere from 24 to 48 hours afterwards, but depending on the level of trauma, it can go out to 3 days. You can be dreadfully sore.
10 days.
Well, it can last that long, but typically it rises at about 24 hours. And if you've been through this enough times, you recognize if I'm this sore right now, tomorrow's going to suck.
Yes.
And very probably the third day is going to suck too, but maybe just a little bit less.
If I have an activity like that and I'm actually not really sore the next day, I'm like, oh no, it's going to be really bad. Tomorrow's going to be really bad.
Another area of agreement is that there's probably a genetic component, as there often is, in that they've recognized that certain athletes are very sensitive to this muscle soreness, and the intensity of the muscle soreness varies from athlete to athlete, even if they do the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then and this is general, but that it's aggravated by other stressors. But this is what leads me back to the whole brain-centered neurotrophic factor theory. So other forms of stress can have an impact on the severity of your delayed onset muscle soreness, on DOMS. Dehydration being one of them, nutrition and the intake of your macros. Are you getting enough carbohydrate, enough protein, et cetera? So without being any more specific than that, they do impact it, or there's evidence to show. And then a really interesting one, and this just surfaced at the ACSM conference this year, is that your psychological headspace can really affect your level of muscle soreness, which is crazy. In particular, they had one group of athletes that had higher levels, or a group of athletes, and the ones who demonstrated higher levels of pre-levels of anxiety and depression actually had greater levels of muscle soreness post doing the same workout. Sleep deprivation, they've recognized that sleep deprivation elevates your sensitivity to pain, lowers your pain tolerance, and that too has had an impact on the severity of delayed onset muscle soreness. And then in 2012, PAR did a study where they told the subjects that you're going to be extremely sore. This is going to make you very sore. They basically tried to inspire fear in them.
Yeah.
And the ones who were more fearful of the workout took longer and took longer to heal and dealt with a higher level of muscle soreness afterward.
It's all in your head.
So much so that they
all in
could
your head.
use the fear of injury to predict how long it would take them to recover from the exercise.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's all in your head.
We should have like a workout where, well, I might be doing this too already, where we just lie to you about your watts. So we say they're lower than they actually are, and you do them.
Just sowed that seed of doubt that we might.
But I mean, it's just like you.
We talked about that
you
last
get
week.
through more,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like it's all in your brain.
Yeah,
And we
much is.
Quick aside.
And it's not all in your brain. It's just there's just a strong link between brain and body and brain.
Yes.
And it can't be underplayed.
Quick aside, we're always testing different versions of Trainer Road, and at one point early on, we actually gave an employee a version of Trainer Road that was actually displaying watts minus 50 or like minus 30 or something.
That was a joke.
And it was it was a total joke, and it was really hilarious actually to see how frustrated the rider was. But yeah.
To jump into your right here, I just heard of another study where they had strength athletes. They were trained for 6 weeks. And then they measured their gains in 6 weeks, and they told everyone, "Hey, take this pill. We're going to give you some steroids.
Yeah.
Go for another 6 weeks."
Yeah.
They had 3 times the amount of gains in that next 6 weeks. No one took steroids. It was all just sugar pills. Yeah, like placebos. But they thought they were on steroids, so they thought that like they're going to get more and be stronger and try harder.
I'm not surprised.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's fascinating, huh?
Okay, so I'm wrapping this up.
Yep.
There is so some areas where there is some agreement is that where the muscle soreness takes place, and it's typically only the affected muscle. But as we just discussed, train one leg and the other leg's mysteriously sore. So that kind of that's where there isn't agreement. That there's an intensity duration influence. But we've seen that.
Logical.
And then it's tied to the amount of mass recruited. And I think this leaks to the neurotrophic theory, in that the bigger the perceived threat to the brain, the more muscle that's affected, the greater the intensity of the muscle soreness and maybe the duration. The type of exercise is pretty much agreed upon, but it ranges. So, I mean, everything from high intensity down to low intensity, long duration. There is a consensus on that it's almost always unfamiliar. And there's usually an eccentric component, but that certainly doesn't stand up when it comes to cycling, because there's no eccentric contraction on a bicycle. It just isn't.
Yeah.
And then there is agreement on the fact that the ultimate outcome is the protective effect, or what we probably call it's adaptation, or what they call the repeated bout effect, which that you do the exercise once, and then later when you do it again, even if you up the ante, there's less swelling, there's less reduction in strength and the range of motion, and there's quicker recovery. We see adaptations at all the levels, whether it's neural, mechanical, or way down at the cell level.
So we let's say we have DOMS. Like, what do we do? Like, how do we deal with it?
Yeah.
What are appropriate ways? Because I've seen people say, like, when you have DOMS, don't touch a foam roller and don't go to get a massage at all.
Yeah,
I've seen
but
other
they're all
people, you need
based-
to work it out.
They're all based on which theory you subscribe to. So if you think it's muscle damage, then you're not going to want to roll your muscle damage or undergo a massage, because you're going to further the damage, right? This is muscle that's trying to heal, and you're going to get in there and work it.
Yeah.
But what if you think it's a metabolic cause or a neurotrophic cause? I mean, there's not even agreement on this. But I mean, it really comes down to, I'll tell you some of the staunch don'ts. One is don't stretch, don't roll, or massage intensely.
Yeah.
Intensely being the key word there. Don't exercise intensely. Once again, intensely being the key word. Don't bother with all of these recovery modalities: cryo, icing, homeopathy, ultrasound, electric stimulation, Epsom salts, cherry juice, extra water, compression garbage. I meant garments. And there does seem to be some benefit, and it probably doesn't do any harm to undergo light activity, anything that makes the blood flow or moves the lymph around. But again, that subscribes to the inflammation end of things and not necessarily the DOM side of things.
Right. So who knows if it's actually effective, but at the very least, you're doing something.
In my personal opinion, and of all these studies that I read, all the reading I've done in the last couple of days and prior to this, is you simply have to get over it. You have to grin and bear it. The only thing that prevents DOMS is DOMS. Your body goes through it once, and then it gets better at enduring it in the future or avoiding it entirely.
So is muscle pain during recovery proportional to the training load or quality? No.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Yeah.
I can't conclusively say yes or no.
Yeah, just because another person is more sore doesn't mean that they are training more. Just because you're more sore or less sore.
Or yeah.
Yep.
Is it Amilis?
Yeah, Amilis. Yeah, I would
So
think,
no hard answer there, buddy.
Look what you've
He's
done.
got lots of info. Once again, no truth, just knowledge.
Well, Sophia, you're the highest level here. Do you get sore after every single workout?
No.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's like, at least for nationals, like I had a specific national workout that I did. And the first time I did it, I was like, okay, this was a little hard. Like power numbers weren't great. But then the second time I went out, I was better. And then the third time it was like better. And then we increased it up a little bit more. So it's kind of like just anytime you're starting to do something for the first time, your body's not used to it. So it's like, oh, what's going on?
brain.
You know, like I started doing threshold stuff on the flats. I never do that. I always do it on the climb, and my body's like, whoa, this is really, really hard.
It's weird how different it is.
Yeah, so it's kind of just, it's something new, and, you know, just know if you're feeling the fatigue, is you're getting stronger at the end of the day.
Yeah, you just got to get your brain to loosen the leash.
Yep. Yeah. We're going to rip through 2 more so then we can get you up onto the mountain to go do some testing. Ryan
you,
says,
2 hours,
how can I get over being bummed about my successes? Over the past couple years, I've gotten more and more into cycling and racing, specifically cross-country mountain biking. Nice. Ryan's a really good person, I can tell. Says, I used to be quite overweight at 235 pounds and set out to get fit. I'm now at 184 pounds and have participated in a number of races, winning my first overall Cat 4XC race just this past weekend. Way
Great
to
job.
go.
Congratulations.
He says,
50-pound weight loss and a win.
I know, right? It's pretty awesome. He says, despite some objective successes, I can't help but feel a little bummed after every milestone I reach. For example, I keep myself thinking, winning a Cat 4 race is nothing to brag about. All the fast people are in Cat 3 or above. Or 185 is better, but I'll be faster when I'm at 175. What advice do you have for enjoying current successes while maintaining motivation to improve? This one's really tough.
Yeah, just off the top of my head, you'll never be happy with what you get until you're happy with what you've got. And that's something that applies to so many situations, and this is a perfect example of that. I mean, there's always better, but you have to be happy with right now. And I'm not trying to wax philosophical here, but any win's a win, and any of these are worth congratulating yourselves and recognizing your achievement.
Yep.
And I mean, even like when you see high-level professionals win a lower-level race or just a stage of something, I mean, they take that very seriously every single time, and I think that's necessary. If you're going to compete at the high level and you're going to marginalize all your victories and all of your accomplishments, you're not going to stay motivated for very long.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is something I'm sure that you dealt with athletes as a coach when you were dealing with individual athletes.
Yeah,
You're trying to help them
more
through
of them were just thrilled with any form of success, so it wasn't a frequent challenge.
How have you dealt with this, Sophia? Because your rise to prominence has been really fast. And I've even heard you, actually, I can't think of a specific instance, but I remember even hearing you being like, yeah, it's a win, but, you know, it's not where I want to be.
Yeah. This is such an interesting question because, like you said, I am dealing with this now, you know, like 3 years ago, if you would have told me, hey, you're going to podium at COT or HC, I would have been thrilled. And then, you know, I got a 4th place there and I was like, ugh, what if I would have hung on 30 seconds more and then maybe I could have gotten 2nd or 3rd. So the thing I'm learning, it's like, wow, really enjoy the experience and enjoy where you're at right now. And you just never know what's going to happen a year or 2 out. So it's kind of like, don't be kind of wanting that future success and look at how far you've come. Like, man, to lose that much weight, like his quality of life has drastically changed.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. So celebrate that, you know, and at the end of the day, you're winning a race. If you hadn't shown up, someone else would have won.
Yep.
So you showed up, you still have to show up to the start line to win.
Yep.
And a win is a win. So like enjoy it, celebrate it. And then, maybe that's motivation to work a little harder to progress, but don't cut yourself short.
Another thing to add to this too is don't feel bad if you feel this way. I think it's really common to feel this way, and don't feel bad about that. Don't feel like you're ungrateful and you need to, you know, punish yourself in some way for this. It's natural, I think, to feel this way when you're the type of person that's seeking improvement. I mean, it's the same thing with like business too, right? Like,
yeah, I have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people like with, you know, they start their business, they get to 1 million in annual revenue, and they're like, yeah, whatever. But it's not, you know, I know other people that have, you know, 35 million, and it's just you constantly feel like you're trying to change it.
Yeah, just as you said, I'm in a group called Entrepreneurs Organization, EO. A lot of business owners. This is very, very common for people where they get to a big mark or they do something awesome and they don't feel fulfilled. And same thing, winning races, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I think it's okay and it's awesome. And it has to go down to a few things. One is, and this is the way I am, I enjoy the process, right? And if you enjoy the process more than the result, I think you're in a great spot in life. The result to me is like, but we talk a lot about finding your why, and there's even a book called Finding Your Why. And I'm still searching for this, but I think mine is building things, building the business, myself, connections with people, or helping people do that, which I'm lucky because I can do it through the podcast. I get to go do that through Trainer Road and help build people too. So if I get to do that every day, that's awesome. A win isn't part of my why. It's nice, but like I like to go back and do the process more and like, oh, I can build some more. I can build some more. I can put some more on. So I don't get, when I win something, I don't feel fulfilled. And that's fine. I do feel fulfilled after I did 2-hour Baxter yesterday. Sometimes that feels better than some wins, like doing that part of the process. Or at Trainer Road, when we build something really great, we do a really good podcast, or someone comes up and says, you know, we've helped you a whole bunch. So that's fine if you enjoy the process. If you hate the process and you don't get anything from the wins, I don't know if you're in the right spot.
It'll end. There's going to be an end point soon.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you don't enjoy the process, period, you're in the wrong sport.
But some people, though, it's
really common to see that, though, right? Especially with some high-level athletes.
Shameful, really. I don't know why you'd want to spend your time doing something that doesn't bring you enjoyment.
Some people, though, are all about the wins, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think it's perfectly fine. I am the same way as you. If I want to, I have district champ and Cat 3 cyclocross with 2 other competitors. I didn't get any joy from that win. I mean, it was kind of cool, but then I was like, I didn't really get a lot of joy, right?
Yeah.
If we win Cape Epic, when we win Cape Epic,
Yep.
I'll get some joy from that. That'll be a good accomplishment. But the process, I'm really looking forward to the 2-year process of increasing my descending skills and raising my power weight ratio so I can keep up with Speedy.
Solid perspective.
The way that I handle things is, once again, I'm a process person. I really enjoy that part of it. And I just see the wins as like a double step or a step that was a little bit bigger. And once again, it's still building towards something else. And I'm excited that I did it. And I do. And much like all of us, I'm sure, listening to this, it is hard for me to it's hard to give myself credit for the wins a lot of the time, or feel like, it was something that I should be really proud of, something like that. But I feel like I've gotten better, and I think especially as a father, it's made me better at that, because I've been helping my son to recognize the fact that like there are things to be celebrated. It doesn't mean that you just stop and you've reached that goal, but you continue on. I actually feel like I kind of have a good balance with that right now, even if it's like a small race or if it's, like you said, a tough workout. It's something to like, don't be afraid to pat yourself on the back as long as it helps you get to the next step. You know what I mean?
Yeah, win's a win. It doesn't have to come from a race either.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think this is where goal setting really comes into play. Like if you sit down at the beginning of the season and you set a bunch of goals, and then at the end of the year you go back and look at it and you're like, oh my God, look at all these things that I've achieved. Because if you don't write them down, it's not, I don't know, I write them down and I start kind of like checking them off as I go through them. Because sometimes, you're like, well, whatever. Like, I just won my Pro XCT. Like, it was hard, but like, okay, what's next? Like, I want to go win something else. So it's kind of like, give yourself credit when credit's due and enjoy the process.
We're going to close it out with a question on how to gain free speed from Matt. He says, hey guys, I have a question about weight, momentum, and rolling resistance. I'm a 45-year-old male, 5'11", and 145 pounds. I have an FTP of around 240 and race on a traditional carbon road bike with aluminum non-aero wheels and a regular helmet, meaning non-aero helmet. Total bike weight is around 18.5 pounds. I've noticed that in local races, I don't roll as fast as other guys. When there's a flat section or even during a turn and I'm in the draft and coasting, not using the brakes, the riders in front of me have to pedal less and seem to use less effort and sometimes gap me. Does this come down to aerodynamics, mass, or rolling resistance? Forgive me. He says, some of the guys I race against weigh up to 200 pounds. Plus, almost everyone in this race has aero wheels or aero road bikes, and a lot of them have aero road helmets. Most of the races are flat with no real climbing, and I often race a few crits. Should I look at my bike's rolling resistance or my overall aerodynamics? Does an aero bike with aero wheels help even when drafting? Thanks for your help.
This is me and you, Sophia.
This is
right.
Yeah,
So
right?
it's going to be
Exactly.
it's going to be exaggerated in mountain biking because of rolling resistance on the dirt.
Yep. And I know, Nate, I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts on this one.
I do have a lot of thoughts. Okay, so speed is a mix of what you're overcoming is gravity, but this is a flat race, so let's say gravity's out of it. Aerodynamics and rolling resistance.
Yes.
Right? But also your weight comes into matter to keep you rolling. So bigger riders, it takes more energy to get us up to speed.
Yes.
But also you have that mass up speed, you have more energy. So when you get slowed down from aero penalties or rolling resistance, and really in here could be some rolling resistance, you have more energy to like overcome that.
Yes.
That's why like bigger riders usually go faster downhill because you're overcoming wind resistance and you have more potential energy when you're at the top of the hill and you're pushing through it. Although when you go into a vacuum, when there's no air resistance, a feather drops the same speed
as a bowling ball.
Yeah, as a bowling ball,
Yep.
which is crazy when you look at those
It's nuts.
videos.
Yeah.
When you think of, oh, well, shouldn't all riders descend at the same speed now, though? No, it's because there's more potential energy in those big riders at the top of a hill, and they have more force to push through the aerodynamic drag, and that's why they descend faster.
Yep.
So for you, it's definitely it's just you're a lighter rider, like, and so you're not going to have that momentum that builds up.
And I've noticed that a ton, riding in groups or riding in races, that sort of stuff. Being a lighter rider, it's always, you always have to keep that in mind. I think in the women's field for you, there aren't many pro women that are really tall. Rose is an example of an athlete that I think is taller, but there aren't a whole lot of them. But have you noticed that, because you're a relatively small rider, and how have you overcome that?
Yeah, in the women's field, honestly, it becomes more skills.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
especially descending, the better skilled you are, the faster you're gonna go.
Yeah.
We have pretty big discrepancy on there, but like a fat tire crit, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah,
that's
that's where you
kind of
really see
where
it.
you can actually start to see it a little bit more, and
Yeah.
you can't change it. Like, I'm not gonna put weight so I can put more
Yeah.
power on the flats. Like, if anything, I'm like, I should probably lose 1 or 2 to be better on the uphill.
Yeah.
So you can't change what other people weigh or what,
Yeah. I think one low-hanging fruit and something you do for the fat tire crits is you switch out your tires.
Yes.
And you improve the rolling resistance. And just looking at this guy set up, 18 and a half pounds. It's like a carbon road bike with aluminum non-aero wheels. So yes, aerodynamics still matter in a draft. It's not a full vacuum. You're still dealing with breaking through air, so that matters for sure. But rolling resistance, I feel like, is huge. Huge. Like, yeah,
It can be 14 watts between tires.
Yeah.
And setups.
If you have some
Gator skins.
Gator skins on there, they're always the example. Those poor tires, they get but if you have
Good
some
training tires.
They're bomb-proof tires.
Yeah. If you have some Gator skins versus something like, I don't know, like the SRX Turbos or, like a
GP5000
GP5000, something like that, that makes a huge difference. And that is something you
Enormous.
can genuinely feel. When you're coasting into a turn, it feels like you maintain more.
Yep. The other thing that you can do, Matt, let's say you're optimized for that, and you talk about aero equipment too. Even if the person in front of you is the most aerodynamically optimized person and they're 200 pounds and you're in their draft, you're still getting less than them, like less of a. You're getting more of a draft than them.
Yeah, you're still more efficient moving through a chunk of air.
But a big thing is, and I have not done this, there's going to be a video this week. I did this poorly, and it cost me a couple places, is doing that extra pedal stroke into the turn.
Yes.
If you can even open a little
It's
bit of a
huge.
gap, do an extra pedal stroke or two, so you're kind of rolling into them.
Yes.
I notice I do this where I'm afraid, I've clipped pedals, I'm afraid that I'm going to clip a pedal, so I stop pedaling before other people, and then they gap me in the turn.
Yeah.
And then you have to pedal more. And I'm a big guy, so I should have more rolling. But that extra pedal stroke or two makes up for the 50-pound, 55-pound difference that you have.
Yes.
sometimes even like if it's a U-turn, I mean, makes more sense in mountain biking because our corners are tight, but are you shifting before you turn?
Yep.
Because right, like if you're with a rider and you're in front, you're behind them, and they shift up before the turn, their acceleration is going to be a lot less.
Yeah.
Where for me, if I'm still pushing a really big gear, I'm really gonna lose like 2 to 3 seconds in just being able to get it over that gear. So there's just so many other things that take into account.
Yeah, or just getting into the right gear, period, right? Because you might be in a situation where they get into the right gear beforehand, and then you waste time of not pressing as hard on the pedals because you have to, you know, allow the chain to move on the cogs. That's a big thing. The other thing too is getting comfortable with following close. And when I mean close, so I know that the rule is don't overlap wheels, right? Like that's like the rule, but overlapping wheels happens all the time.
Oh yeah.
And it's something that you can strategically do in cases where you know that, for example, like Nate was talking about when you're in a turn, if you come up and you have momentum coming into that turn, more momentum than the person in front of you, doesn't mean you have to hit your brakes.
Don't touch your brakes, yeah.
Just carry that momentum and roll up onto the side of them. And then
if you have the option, yeah.
Yeah, and then roll back. Just let yourself fall back. It's the preservation of momentum. That's like one thing that Pete has taught me really well. And you can see all of his race analysis videos. He's so good at preserving momentum in a race.
And he's big, 210 pounds. So
Yep.
that helps. And he has to, or else he has to accelerate all the time. And
Good
he'll
riders
get
can
tired.
torture you in the turns.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just to make you have to accelerate so hard out of them every time just because they take it a little bit better, or they get that one extra pedal stroke going into the corner, or they pedal just a little earlier coming out of the corner. But if they do it well, you just get beat up. You learn real quick how important it is to ride as well as they do.
So if you, if you are going to overlap wheels, overlap on the inside of the turn, not the outside of the turn.
Yeah.
Oh, on the outside of the turn, and they start to drift a little bit, you're going to have a really bad time.
Exactly.
On the inside of the turn, normally if they start to cut in more, you can just cut in more, and it's not a bad time.
Yeah. Then chances are you're actually more visible to them when you're on the inside versus the outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's
they probably won't.
Safer position to be in for
sure.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, yes. There in this case, you can kind of buy speed. Like, with more, like you guys switch over to those Velocitas, the Maxxis tires that you switch over to the fat tire skin suit. All those things, you being aero in the draft still matters, but at the same time, there are actionable things you can do just with your bike and yourself when you end up riding too. So, well, Sophia, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think that we have some streaming issues right now, so I don't know if we have any questions that have come through. So, and we're obviously out of time anyway. So, let's close this one out. Wishing you good luck at Carson City Off-Road. Good luck at all the remaining races that you have throughout the season. Where can people find you and follow you on your different platforms, social channels, that sort of stuff?
Instagram is the best.
Okay.
Just look up my name. I'm the only one that has that name, luckily.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And then Sophie the Via, I think, is the tag on there. So you can check it out there. Also, the Stan's Pivot Pro team, we're a team sponsor. They're an awesome team. We're happy to be their sponsor. And you ride for that team as well, so you can check out the team there. And if you enjoyed this podcast, let us know by either rating us on whatever podcast app you use. There are plenty of them. Or if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, something like that, like the video. Let us know what you want to hear from us. And you can do that at trainerroad.com/podcast. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.